Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the smoke-thick alleys of 1970s Macau, where neon buzzes through the fog, the dice never sleep, and a kid with a chipped tooth is learning that loyalty cuts deeper than any blade. The air smells like gasoline and steamed pork buns. The sidewalks shimmer with casino runoff, and the stories, they don't end. They vanish, swallowed by silence, or by men who don't forget. We're meeting Wan Kuok-koi, better known as Broken Tooth, a man who didn't just watch Macau change. He helped carve its silhouette into something darker, hungrier, and oddly magnificent. But fair warning, you probably wouldn't survive this ride. Not unless you know when to nod, when to bow, and when to vanish for a while. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. He's not born into power. Wan Kuok-koi enters the world in 1955 in the creaking tile-roofed tenements of Macau's Santo Antonio district. Back then, Macau is Portuguese in name, but Chinese in heartbeat, a colonial cocktail of Lisbon charm and Cantonese survivalism. The casinos haven't yet exploded, but the bones of the city are twitching with ambition. And Wan? He's the fourth of 6 children, a wiry boy with sharp cheekbones and sharper instincts. His parents work long hours. His mother sells vegetables in the market, cabbage, taro, bruised apples, and his father, when he's not gambling, works as a rickshaw puller. That's how Wan learns 2 things early: the cost of hope and the weight of disappointment. He sees men lose their wages on a single turn of a tile. He watches fights erupt over borrowed coins, and by age 9, he knows how to disappear behind crates of bok choy when the drunk ones start swinging. But Macau isn't just hardship, it's theater. Street performers juggle knives, Taoist priests chant beside incense pyres, and in smoky fan halls, those low-lit community gathering spots, men play mahjong with movements like brush strokes. That's where Wan first learns silence is a weapon. He observes, studies, waits. He doesn't talk much, but he sees everything. By 12, he's skipping school more than attending. The teachers don't bother chasing him anymore. He's small, but quick. And when the older boys start making trouble, Wan doesn't run. He asks to join. There's a rhythm to street fights. Wan gets beat up, sure, but he gets smarter each time. He learns who flinches before they swing, who smiles before they stab. His first win comes when he picks up a brick and throws it without warning. The crowd erupts. Someone gives him a meat bun and calls him Crazy Little Tooth. The nickname doesn't last, but the glint in his eye does. Around this time, he starts hanging around Rua da Felicidade, Street of Happiness, which is exactly the opposite of its name. Brothels, pawn shops, noodle stalls, a microcosm of Macau's underbelly, where whispers outlast the echo of footsteps. Wan watches a man get stabbed over a gambling debt behind a dumpling stall. No one screams. No one calls the police. Just silence, steam, and a slow walk away. He doesn't blink. That night, he tells his older brother what he saw. His brother shakes his head and mutters, "Don't look too long at ghosts. They'll think you see them." Wan starts making deliveries for a tea shop near the docks. Harmless enough until he realizes half the boxes smell like opium. The shop owner says nothing. Neither does Wan, but he's paid in crisp patakas, more than his father earns in a week. He doesn't ask questions, just runs faster. One day, a 14K enforcer named Uncle Fong spots him in an alleyway, watching a dice game with too much interest. Instead of shooing him, Fong hands him a cigarette and says, "You see more than most adults." Wan doesn't light it, just tucks it behind his ear like a grown man. Fong laughs, slaps his back. "Kid's got a broken tooth and an old man's soul." The broken tooth? That comes shortly after. A street scuffle over turf, a rusted pipe to the face. It cracks his front incisor clean through. For weeks he tries to hide it, embarrassed. But soon, the missing shard becomes a symbol. People remember the smile, the blood-streaked grin. "That's the kid with the broken tooth," they say. The name sticks. By 16, Wan is fluent in 3 things: Cantonese profanity, back alley routes through the city, and when to shut up. He's not officially in a triad, not yet, but the 14K starts to notice. He runs errands for Fong, keeps watch, carries notes, and always returns them sealed. That alone earns trust. A mainstream historical note here. During the 1970s, Macau's economy is shifting. The Portuguese government loosens restrictions on gambling. Tourism picks up. Casinos expand. But with opportunity comes organized crime. Triads, like 14K, Wo Shing Wo, and others, start to stake claims in the chaos. There's money to be made in the margins: security, protection, influence. And kids like Wan become tools in that machinery. He doesn't mind. Not yet. There's a thrill in being useful. He stops making tea deliveries and starts collecting debts. Nothing violent. Just a reminder. A visit. A look. And the broken tooth grin. One night, Fong tells him to stay behind after a job. They sit on a rooftop overlooking the ferry terminal. Boats shimmer in the harbor, their lights smudged by sea mist. Fong hands him a steamed bun and says, "You ever think about becoming more?" Wan doesn't answer. Just bites the bun and watches the horizon. Many people still think that Wan was always ruthless, but records suggest his early years were marked more by observation than violence. So what do you think? Is ruthlessness born or built? By the time he's 18, he's unofficially one of the most trusted errand boys in 14K's Macau wing. But trust in the underworld isn't a ladder. It's a tightrope. And somewhere beneath that rope, the casinos are starting to glow brighter. Wan Kuok-koi isn't dreaming of riches. Not yet. He's dreaming of control, and that dream is about to get teeth. By the time Wan Kuok-koi turns 19, he isn't just the kid with the broken tooth anymore. He's become something else. A presence. Not quite feared, not yet obeyed, but known. In Macau's alleyways and cramped tea shops, people lower their voices when he enters. He doesn't swagger or raise his tone. He listens. He watches. And more often than not, he remembers. He's still operating in the margins. His jobs don't have titles, and his status isn't formalized, but he now handles envelopes. Not just money, but messages, threats, warnings, even apologies. One day, he delivers a red envelope with nothing inside but a single bullet. He doesn't ask. The man who receives it turns pale, nods once, and the debt is settled by morning. The fan halls, those community centers for gambling, gathering, and gossip, become his classrooms. Wan spends hours there, not playing, but watching older men lose fortunes in silence. There's a rhythm to it, the shuffle of mahjong tiles, the hiss of boiling kettles, the clink of porcelain cups. He learns to read tension in shoulder movements, to spot lies in how a man sips his tea. One rainy night, Uncle Fong pulls him aside in the back room of a noodle shop. The room smells of fish sauce and cigarette ash. On the table lies a black-bound ledger, slick with oil from decades of hands. Fong taps the cover. "This is the old world," he says. "You're going to help me write the new one." Wan nods. He doesn't know what that means yet, but he will. The plan isn't to take Macau by force. That's outdated. Wan and Fong understand something subtler. Macau is changing. Casinos are growing. Tourists are flooding in from Hong Kong, Taiwan, even Japan. The old rackets, protection, extortion, aren't disappearing, but they're evolving. There's more money now, more eyes, more risk. To survive, a triad must adapt. Wan suggests a test. Install 2 men at the back exit of a popular casino. They're not there to fight. They're there to watch who slips out owing money. They note the patterns, the faces, the schedules. Within weeks, Wan is delivering personalized reminders to gamblers before they've even left their hotel rooms. No threats, just firm smiles and accurate math. Debts get paid. The casino management, quietly, starts turning a blind eye. After all, they're losing fewer chips. Around this time, Wan's name reaches the ears of mid-level 14K figures in Hong Kong. He's summoned across the water for a meeting. Not an invitation, more a summons. The ferry ride is choppy, and Wan stands on deck the entire way, staring at the gray line of Kowloon's skyline. The meeting takes place in a mahjong parlor above a bakery. The walls are yellowed from smoke. 3 men sit behind a green felt table, their faces impassive. Wan bows, waits, and finally speaks. "I don't want to be a boss," he says. "I want to make the bosses richer." That earns him a laugh and a test. He's asked to solve a territorial dispute between 2 Kowloon Street crews. Wan listens, draws a diagram with soy sauce on the table, and suggests that instead of dividing turf by street, they divide it by service. One crew handles security, the other handles loan enforcement. Less overlap, more cooperation. They give him 2 weeks. It takes him 5 days. Back in Macau, his reputation returns before he does. People start calling him Mr. Wan instead of Kuok-koi. The broken tooth, once a point of mockery, becomes a symbol. It's in every whispered story now. He grinned when he got stabbed. He laughed while collecting from 5 men alone. He spoke once, and a nightclub changed hands. The stories blur fact and fantasy, but Wan doesn't correct them. He understands the value of myth. Historically, during the 1980s, Macau was undergoing its own quiet transformation. With the expiration of Portugal's lease on the horizon, power structures were loosening. The colonial government, distracted and fading, struggled to enforce laws in the shadowy world of casino politics. This vacuum created space for figures like Wan, not politicians, not businessmen, but hybrids, operators, middlemen with muscle. Wan begins dressing differently. Tailored suits, gold chains, 2-tone leather shoes that click louder than necessary. But he still moves with silence. His headquarters is modest, a back room above a seafood restaurant, but he fills it with small luxuries: calligraphy scrolls, hand-carved dragon figurines, incense burners that never burn out. And on the wall behind his desk, a painted screen of Mount Tai, the mountain of immortals. He starts employing men of his own, not soldiers, clerks, accountants, drivers who don't ask questions. Every new hire is vetted personally, and each one receives the same instruction: never run. Walk, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. Many people still think that Wan rose to power with brute force alone. But the more you look, the more you realize his empire was built on observation, on knowing who owed whom, who was sleeping with whom, and who was one loss away from selling secrets. So what do you think? Is information more dangerous than a gun? One evening, Wan sits alone on the casino floor of the Lisboa. He isn't gambling, just sipping tea, watching the chips move. A pit boss notices him, nods, and subtly adjusts the camera angles above. Wan smiles. The house always wins, but sometimes the house takes instructions. The night ends quietly. A phone call, a name, a suggestion, and a week later, a new face is seen managing a dice table that used to belong to someone else. No one says Wan did it, but no one doubts it either. And from that point on, Macau's casino shadows start to shift, just a little, every time Wan Kuok-koi smiles. By the mid-1980s, Macau is vibrating with a strange energy, half fading colonial charm, half neon-fed ambition. And in the middle of that collision, Wan Kuok-koi is becoming more than just a respected figure in the underworld. He's becoming something rarer, a brand. The broken tooth that once embarrassed him has evolved into his unofficial emblem. In dimly lit fan halls, in whispered dice games near the docks, men joke that if you see the smile, it's already too late. Wan doesn't laugh at the joke, but he lets it circulate. He understands something most enforcers don't. Fear works best when delivered with a polite nod and a visible weakness. The broken tooth humanizes him, makes him seem like he's been hurt, like he's survived. And people respect survivors more than predators. He leans into the image, not theatrically, but just enough to make the myth swell. His outfits become more curated, slick, dark mandarin collar suits, jade rings, and occasionally a single red silk pocket square that some say is a quiet tribute to blood debts unpaid. He doesn't correct them. One particular afternoon, he walks into a jewelry store on Avenida de Almeida Ribeiro. The shop owner, nervous but cordial, offers him tea. Wan inspects a jade Buddha pendant and smiles. "Do you think this brings protection?" he asks. The man stammers. "Only if you believe, sir." Wan nods. "I believe in patterns." He buys the pendant, leaves a tip too generous, and exits with 3 teenagers watching him from across the street. Those kids later claim he never touched the ground. That's Macau for you. Fact woven with silk-thin fantasy. What is certain is this: Wan begins consolidating control, not with violence, but with ritual. He attends weddings, covers funeral costs, helps settle long-standing feuds between rival triad families, not because he has to, but because these gestures earn currency that no bullet can buy. He even begins meeting with casino owners, not in back rooms, but in plain sight. He dines at restaurants with mirrored walls and gold-plated menus. He orders bird's nest soup and eats it slowly, letting others sweat through their shark fin stew. It's his way of saying, "I'm not hiding, and I don't need to." Historically, this was a period when Macau's casino industry was in flux. The legendary Stanley Ho's monopoly was dominant, but behind the curtains, junket operators, unofficial credit liaisons, and debt collectors were growing in power. These junkets brought in high-rolling gamblers from across Asia and ensured they kept gambling. But collecting from them when they lost? That's where men like Wan came in. He doesn't just work for junket bosses. He becomes one. Quietly, efficiently. He learns which VIP rooms are laundering operations, which rooms host games with prearranged outcomes. He doesn't disrupt them. He refines them. The first time someone fails to pay a 6-figure debt, Wan sends a note. Just a note. Folded precisely into quarters. No signature. The man pays within 48 hours and then leaves town. Many people still think Wan built his empire with machetes and Molotovs, but those were tools of the past. He used silence, pattern, and memory. So what do you think? Can fear be sharper when it arrives without a sound? Still, not everything goes according to plan. One night, a rival crew intercepts one of his couriers, beats him badly, dumps him in Cologne with a plastic bag over his head. The message is clear. Some people aren't playing along. Wan doesn't respond immediately. He waits. A week. Then another. Then he invites the rival's top lieutenant to dinner. The man shows up at a seafood restaurant near the inner harbor. Wan's already there, sipping fish broth, his smile showing just enough of the broken tooth. He gestures for the man to sit. They exchange pleasantries. No threats. No accusations. Only a short, cryptic toast to those who remember the difference between silence and surrender. That lieutenant switches sides 2 days later. The courier who got beaten? Promoted. Wan understands that in Macau, a public fight draws heat from the Portuguese police, and worse, the press. So he plays the long game, cutting deals in whispers and letting time do the shouting. He also starts investing, not just in people, but in property. A few crumbling apartments in Say, a tea warehouse on the peninsula, even a struggling pawn shop that no one thinks is worth saving. But Wan sees the angles. He has his eye on proximity, which alleys lead to which casinos, which rooftops overlook which entrances. He's not just building territory, he's laying out a chessboard, and the pieces begin to move. One of his boldest plays involves a nightclub popular with junior Portuguese officers. It's seedy but profitable, tucked into a narrow back street with poor lighting. Wan offers to buy it. The owner refuses. A week later, the club is shut down for fire code violations. The following month, it reopens, with new ownership, new lighting, and new dancers. Wan never sets foot in it, but he's rumored to own the liquor license, the security firm, and 3 of the dancers' contracts. At this point, whispers begin. Wan isn't just a triad figure. He's Macau's unofficial mayor. When tourists go missing or debts go unpaid, people don't call the police. They call Wan. And more often than not, the problem resolves. Quietly. The Portuguese authorities begin to take notice, but their hands are tied. The casino economy is booming. Money is flowing in. And every official knows that causing a stir could jeopardize everything. Wan, for his part, remains polite. He attends local business meetings, funds a small scholarship program for neighborhood kids, even donates to a Buddhist temple under his mother's name. One evening, during a lantern festival, he walks the streets like anyone else. Children laugh, fireworks crackle overhead, and people greet him with respectful nods. He smiles, the broken tooth catching the lantern light. Someone murmurs, "It's good to have someone like him watching over the city." Many people still think that moment marked his peak, when power, myth, and public favor intersected. But what do you think? Can a man maintain control once he starts believing his own legend? Because legends, after all, cast long shadows, and Wan's is only getting darker. It's around 1987 when Wan Kuok-koi finally stops orbiting the 14K Triad and begins moving at its center. By now, his name holds weight, not just in the alleyways, but in whispered conversations among higher-ranking Red Poles. And while he hasn't yet been crowned as a dragon head in the formal sense, he's more than a lieutenant. He's a force, one whose broken smile is more recognizable than most official seals in the city. His induction into formal rank isn't marked by ceremony, it's marked by blood. Not his, though. It starts with a minor casino dispute. A new gambling room opens near Rua de Pala, trying to attract high rollers with no regard for junket boundaries. The unspoken rule is clear. Every VIP belongs to someone. You poach clients. You start a war. Wan offers the new operator a peaceful meeting. The offer is ignored. 3 nights later, the operator's car explodes in a side alley, shattering windows and sending mahjong tiles flying across nearby tables. No one dies, but the message detonates clearly. By sunrise, the VIP clients have all returned to their previous junket bosses, many citing uneasy vibes as their reason. Wan never confirms involvement. When asked, he simply shrugs. I prefer poker to fireworks. It's this precision, this mix of style and silence, that finally earns him a private audience with the Macau Council of Senior 14K leaders. The meeting takes place at a secluded villa near Guia Hill. The air smells of roasted duck and red incense. They don't hand him a sword or ring. Instead, they offer 3 words: keep things balanced, and that becomes his first true mandate. Not to expand, not to kill, but to balance. Wan embraces the role with unnerving clarity. His headquarters moves to a new location. This time, not above a seafood shop, but within a gaudy office complex fitted with chandeliers and tiger print sofas. The place smells like sandalwood and cigarette ash. Visitors sit on overstuffed couches while Wan, always dressed in pressed slacks and a high-collar shirt, sits cross-legged behind a desk flanked by twin koi fish tanks. People begin calling the office the showroom, and it quickly becomes the city's unofficial arbitration center. Casino bosses, junket kings, and even politicians come through, seeking favors or offering them. Wan rarely says no outright. He just adjusts things. If one triad faction is overstepping, he whispers in the ear of another. If a casino refuses to pay a security fee, he redirects gamblers to a rival. His office doesn't enforce balance with fists. It does it with flow. But not all is handled with subtlety. One incident stands out. A local journalist writes a scathing editorial alleging that Wan's influence extends into legitimate casino ownership. The piece runs for 3 days before the man retracts the article, publicly, with tears in his eyes. Rumors swirl that he was visited by a former classmate, now working under Wan, who simply said, "We remember your handwriting." Wan denies any involvement, of course. When pressed by another reporter, he smiles and replies, "I only read calligraphy." It's a time when power seems limitless, and the line between criminal and kingmaker begins to blur. Historically, this period marks the beginning of Macau's golden years for illicit operations. With the 1999 handover looming, Portuguese enforcement became inconsistent at best. The economy was booming, and any disruption, especially from triad violence, was diplomatically inconvenient. This made Macau fertile ground for men like Wan, who understood both the rhythms of street power and the etiquette of elite negotiation. Many people still think Wan only got lucky during this power vacuum. But luck doesn't write ledgers or memorize debt patterns. So what do you think? Does a vacuum make a king or just reveal one? Wan's next move is both bold and theatrical. He begins producing a film, not sponsoring, producing. The company? Broken Tooth Films, Limited. The story: a fictionalized account of Macau's underworld, loosely based on his own rise. He hires actors, directors, even choreographers for fight scenes. But the key casting? Himself. Wan plays the lead. An anti-hero modeled after himself, complete with tailored suits, whispered threats, and of course, a broken tooth. The production becomes legend before it even wraps. Extras share stories of Wan rewriting lines on set, insisting on realism. One actor faints during a rehearsal when Wan casually corrects how to hold a machete. No, the blade leans inward before you speak. The film is never officially released in theaters. It circulates quietly on bootleg VCDs, pass between tea houses and pawn shops. But it becomes iconic, not for its quality, which is middling at best, but because it blurs fact and fiction until the myth becomes inevitable. You're no longer sure what Wan did. You only know what he showed you. The film's real legacy, though, is political. Because shortly after its circulation peaks, Wan is seen dining with prominent business leaders and legislators. Some say it's intimidation. Others say it's admiration. After all, in a city where no one trusts what's printed, a man who tells his own story becomes the only reliable narrator. The term broken tooth moves from back alley nickname to Macau's unofficial brand. He becomes the symbol of something bigger than crime. He becomes the ghost in the casino machine, and he's just getting started. By the time the calendar flips into the early 1990s, Wan Kuok-koi has transcended the typical image of a triad leader. He's no longer just the man in charge of debts and deals. He's something closer to a cultural artifact, a living legend with a chipped tooth and a grin that says, "I've already seen how this ends." The casinos have ballooned in size, and so has the industry swirling around them. Tourists flood in by the thousands. Bankers shake hands with junket men over lobster dinners. Hong Kong celebrities walk Macau's red carpets with triad-linked businessmen in tow. There are champagne fountains, crocodile leather briefcases, and imported Italian suits stitched with monograms only visible in certain light. Wan is there, moving quietly through it all. He rarely shows up in photos, but he's always in the room, always watching, always one conversation ahead. He now owns, or influences, depending on who's telling the story, a constellation of businesses, security firms, loan companies, restaurants, private clubs. None of them scream illegal. That's the beauty of his design. He doesn't need to operate outside the law because he's carefully built structures that dance on the edge of it. And the casinos? They trust him. At least they trust that with him around, debts get paid. Disputes stay small. The junket operations run smooth. And nobody important ends up on the morning news. One casino executive even refers to Wan as our unofficial fire inspector, because anytime something looked like it might catch flame, he'd arrive quietly and make it disappear. Wan embraces the role of mediator. He wears jade rings now, smooth and cool against his skin. His suits are darker, more refined. His office is remodeled, more marble, more incense, more myth. Visitors report hearing ambient guzheng music playing softly in the background, accompanied by the occasional sound of trickling water from a koi pond beneath the window. He carries himself like a monk who's read too many crime novels, but underneath the grace and silk, the edges remain sharp. A debt collector and his crew fails to return the full amount from a junket transaction. Not by much, just a few thousand patakas. He blames a clerical error. Wan says nothing, not at first. Then one morning, that man's apartment is found ransacked, his walls painted with thick brushstrokes of black ink. No words, just brush patterns. Violent, looping swirls like a calligrapher losing his mind. The man resigns the next day, leaves town the next week. Wan says mistakes are acceptable, repetition isn't. It becomes an unofficial motto. Historically, triads like 14K operated with a strict internal hierarchy. Dragon heads, red poles, white paper fans. But Wan disrupts this tradition by consolidating power not through ritual, but through competence. He elevates people who deliver results, regardless of their rank or background. Former chauffeurs become bodyguards. Dishwashers become debt analysts. Loyalty is rewarded, but usefulness is prized more. This terrifies the old guard. Many people still think Wan wanted to reform the triad system to modernize it, but others believe he just wanted it molded to fit him better. So what do you think? Is innovation still innovation when it serves only one throne? Meanwhile, Wan starts appearing in more unusual places. Local charity events, calligraphy exhibitions, even cultural forums on preserving Macanese identity. He delivers short speeches, always calm, always polite. He signs his name in careful characters and donates discreetly. Some see this as a PR campaign. Others think he's grooming something larger, perhaps political aspirations. After all, with the 1999 handover approaching, Macau's future is uncertain. Portugal is retreating, Beijing is watching, and the city's elites are all choosing sides. Wan, as always, stays fluid. He begins meeting with men linked to the Chinese mainland. Not openly, but not entirely in the shadows either. There are rumors of business licenses registered under new names, of meetings held in Guangdong tea houses with closed blinds and coded menus. At the same time, tensions are rising within the underworld. Rival triad factions, particularly from Wo On-lok and Sun Yi-an, are sensing an opportunity. They accuse Wan of monopolizing junket operations, of hoarding VIP clients, of muscling in on venues outside his unofficial zone. Whispers turn to grumbles. Grumbles turn to plans. Wan preempts it. He invites a rival junket boss to dinner, publicly. They dine in the revolving restaurant atop the Macau Tower, the city sprawling beneath them like a living board game. The media catches wind. Paparazzi snap blurry photos. One image shows Wan raising a glass, smiling gently. The caption reads, "Broken tooth reaches for peace." The rival boss vanishes from public view the next week. Retired, they say. Moved to Vancouver, they suggest. No one checks too hard. The point is made, but even as Wan consolidates control, his own image is evolving. He's no longer just the underworld's poet. He's the man who can make a riot go away with a phone call. The man whose silence causes more stress than another's shouting. The man who appears in people's dreams, and not always as a nightmare. And it's in this atmosphere that Wan does something no one expects. He starts planning a school, not for children, for professionals. A leadership center, he calls it, focused on teaching negotiation, discipline, and pattern thinking. He hires architects, buys land, designs uniforms. The promotional materials are stunning, elegant, a little cryptic, but beneath the surface, everyone knows this won't be a school. This will be an academy for loyalists. The project never gets built. Delays, permits, funding gaps, or maybe the point was never to build it at all. Maybe it was just another move, another myth to keep rivals guessing. Many people still think Wan was getting ready to leave crime altogether at this stage. But if you read the room carefully, his room, you'd notice something else. The koi pond beneath the window, it was drained, replaced with glass-covered marble. No more water, no more ripples. So what do you think? Was he trying to reflect clarity or eliminate reflection altogether? Because soon the piece will crack, and in a city full of noise, the loudest signal will come from a quiet smile. By 1992, Wan Kuok-koi is no longer just orbiting Macau's underworld. He's quietly reorienting its gravitational pull. And as with all large celestial bodies, things start to collide. His office, the infamous showroom, hums with a steady flow of influence. Businessmen seeking favors, junior triad members awaiting instructions, casino managers with discreet concerns and fat envelopes. But while the day-to-day keeps running, Wan's vision is shifting towards something more permanent. Control, he believes, isn't just about muscle or money, it's about narrative. So he turns to rituals, not the kind passed down from Qing dynasty brotherhoods, but new ones, crafted, stylized. Every meeting begins with tea, every envelope delivered with both hands, every subordinate required to sign in with a red brushstroke on a black ledger. His inner circle starts referring to these as quiet thunder moments, small acts that echo longer than they seem. He even begins issuing nicknames, just like the old stories. One driver becomes Silk Wheel. A debt collector is dubbed Cold Ink. To outsiders, it's whimsical. To insiders, it's sacred branding. One night, he hosts a dinner at a private club near the reservoir. The menu features abalone, duck tongue, sea cucumber, all symbols of wealth and endurance. The room is dim, filled with soft light reflecting off mirrored tiles. His guests include 3 casino directors, 1 retired Portuguese officer, and a celebrity from Hong Kong whose face is better known than his finances. No one speaks first. Wan pours wine, nods gently, and opens with a question. If a city no longer knows who it belongs to, is that emptiness or opportunity? They drink in silence. No one answers. But that question hangs in the air for months afterward, like incense that never quite fades. Meanwhile, Macau's casino industry is ballooning further, and with it, the junket system grows ever more lucrative and contested. The junket operators, technically just tourism facilitators, are in reality the arteries of the casino economy. They bring in high rollers, extend them credit, and make sure losses are collected. Wan's grip over this space is now uncomfortably tight for his rivals. Enter the men from Hong Kong. 2 factions from rival triads, Sun Yian and Wo On Lok, begin probing Macau's underworld, seeing if they can chip away at Wan's growing monopoly. They offer better rates, higher commissions to junket agents, and the promise of fewer rules. It's a test. Wan doesn't react, not at first. Instead, he hosts a small opera performance. Yes, opera, in a garden villa once owned by a Portuguese wine merchant. His guest list includes old friends, discreet businessmen, and several known affiliates of his enemies. The opera? A traditional Cantonese tragedy where a loyal general is betrayed by his allies and dies singing beneath a plum tree. At intermission, Wan rises and says, "Betrayal has many costumes, but silence is never one of them." No one claps. They simply listen. 3 weeks later, 2 rival junket agents are arrested by Portuguese police for unauthorized loan activity. The charges are minor, but the arrests send a clear message. Someone still controls the phone lines at the police station. Wan never claims credit, but everyone else gives it to him. Historically, this period marks a turning point in Macau's criminal ecosystem. For the first time, violent competition among triad factions spills into public view. There are shootings in hotel lobbies, explosions, blades drawn in alleys that once only hosted whispers. The press coins a term, the Casino Wars. Wan's name starts appearing in tabloids, not always directly, but close enough. Underworld figure attends gala. Prominent businessman questions casino oversight. The headlines try to dance around him, but the silhouette is clear, and yet he never disappears. He doubles down. He upgrades his office once again, this time with a lion statue at the entrance, said to have been carved from stone mined in Mount Wutai. He replaces his jade ring with one in black obsidian. Visitors now say the showroom smells like sandalwood and old money. He also changes his tone. Until now, Wan has ruled with quiet diplomacy, but the casino war is dragging his name into bullets and blood, and that, he knows, is bad for business. So he begins speaking in more formal terms. He releases statements printed on thick cardstock, denying involvement in violent incidents. He meets openly with Portuguese officials, donates to temple restorations, and even funds a scholarship for underprivileged students interested in mathematics and hospitality. Many people still think this was his attempt to go legitimate, but others believe it was a different kind of camouflage. Visibility as invisibility. So what do you think? When a ghost wears a spotlight, is he hiding or performing? Meanwhile, his inner circle tightens. Loyalists with tattoos of dragons, tigers, or even koi fish on their backs stop appearing in public. They're still working, but from the shadows. Wan begins relying more on messengers who look like accountants and chauffeurs who never blink. One of these, a man nicknamed Button, becomes his eyes and ears across the peninsula. Button has no criminal record, no tattoos, no temper, but he can recall license plates from memory and once negotiated down a casino debt using nothing but silence and a photo album. Wan values that, because as the casino wars intensify, the game changes. It's no longer just about who controls the VIP rooms, it's about who can walk from one end of the Lisboa to the other without looking over their shoulder. Wan still does, but not because he's afraid, because he wants to see who else is watching. And on one particularly humid night in 1993, he spots a face he didn't expect. An old friend, long thought dead, seated at a baccarat table, wearing a hat too low and a smile too wide. Wan nods once, leaves a red envelope at the cashier's desk, and disappears into the haze of cigar smoke and slot machine chimes. The man is gone by morning. No one ever speaks of it again. But the envelope? It had only one thing inside, a matchstick, unlit. Many believe that was a message. But messages, like legends, only matter if someone dares to light them. By the midpoint of 1993, Wan Kuok-koi's image is no longer just shaped by shadows. It's beginning to reflect off the mirrored walls of Macau's casinos. His silhouette lingers in surveillance footage, in whispered hallway exchanges, in half-remembered conversations between pit bosses and junket agents. He has become a presence, known, unnamed, and unavoidable. The casinos themselves, those neon monuments to luck and loss, are evolving fast. More tourists arrive daily, more chips change hands, and more money washes in and out like the tide. On the surface, it's all baccarat and fortune cookies, but beneath the blinking signs and flowing cocktails, the casino wars are heating up. Territory isn't the issue, credit is. Junket operators are extending millions in informal loans, backed by little more than face and reputation. When debts go unpaid, consequences ripple. This is where Wan thrives. He doesn't kick down doors. He doesn't need to. He sends a note, or a song, or a book of poetry with one-page dog-eared. One such story becomes legend. A high roller from Guangzhou loses a fortune and refuses to pay. He flies home. Days later, his daughter receives a package at her university dorm, a cassette tape labeled Rain Over Taipa. When she plays it, there's only the sound of soft rainfall and footsteps on wet stone. The man pays. No one gets hurt. Nothing is traced. But Wan's legend deepens. He begins refining his structure. Each of his core operations, security, credit, surveillance, mediation, is assigned to a different lieutenant. But unlike traditional triad hierarchies, Wan's structure is cellular. If one part is compromised, the others continue independently. He treats his empire more like a living system than a pyramid, and like all systems, it adapts. One such adaptation is his growing focus on the casino architecture itself. Wan begins consulting, not formally but informally, on the placement of security cameras, exits, private rooms. He offers suggestions to casino developers who listen attentively. After all, no one wants a fire they can't see coming. One casino's new design includes a curved corridor that ensures no customer can walk more than 50 feet without being watched from at least 2 angles. The architect claims it was for aesthetics, but those who visited Wan's office recognize the curvature from a painting that hangs behind his desk, a golden dragon swallowing its own tail. Symbolism isn't decoration in Wan's world, it's instruction. Historically, this time in Macau is marked by the loosening grip of the Portuguese administration. With the 1999 handover approaching, there's growing uncertainty in governance. Law enforcement is inconsistent. The court system, though present, often moves slower than Triad conflict does. This power vacuum allows organized crime to operate in a twilight space, seen but untouched. Wan takes advantage. He expands operations into hospitality, opens a few private clubs under the names of old classmates and distant cousins. These clubs don't appear on maps and require membership cards engraved with Chinese idioms. The most popular one? Water flows, but the stone remembers. Entry requires a referral. The waitstaff wear white gloves. The menus have no prices. And the walls, soundproofed. On purpose. It's not just Macau that takes notice. Hong Kong journalists begin sniffing around, publishing speculative profiles with titles like The Broken Smile Behind the Chip Empire or From Mahjong to Millionaire. Who is Wan Kuok-koi? Wan doesn't sue. He doesn't protest. He buys an ad in the same paper. Full page, white background, black calligraphy. One phrase, I do not write stories, I remember them. The public is entranced. The media spins faster, and the line between gangster and philosopher starts to blur. Still, tension grows. Rival triads have not gone away. If anything, their desperation is deepening. As Wan tightens his grip on VIP clientele and junket commission routes, those left out begin plotting their return. One night, a senior member of Wo On Lok is stabbed outside a karaoke lounge in Macau. He survives, but barely. The message is unclear. Was it Wan? Was it a false flag? Wan, for his part, attends the man's hospital room the next morning with a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. I came to offer peace, he says. The wounded man doesn't respond. Later, Wan tells a journalist, the only thing louder than violence is kindness delivered too late. That quote gets published, framed, whispered. Many people still think Wan was orchestrating both sides of the war, feeding his own legend by controlling both the chaos and the calm. So what do you think? Can you be both the storm and the shelter? Inside his operation, Wan institutes new rules. No personal feuds. No street-level retaliation without approval. Every conflict must be run through his office, filed, and reviewed. It's bureaucracy, sure, but it's also safety. He refers to it as windless warfare, but even as he pushes for order, the violence continues. A casino guard goes missing. A pit boss is found drowned. A private dealer turns up in Hong Kong with his fingers broken in 9 places. Wan responds not with force, but with rhythm. He increases bonuses to loyal staff, sponsors a lion dance performance during Lunar New Year that parades right through casino lobbies, funds a small poetry contest at a local high school. To outsiders, it's PR. To those in the know, it's reinforcement. Even the city government begins walking cautiously around him. They start using vague language in reports. Unaffiliated businessman, independent security liaison, respected figure in tourism facilitation. He's gone from ghost to gray zone dignitary. And then, the cameras arrive. In the late 1993, A television crew from Hong Kong approaches Wan for an interview. To everyone's surprise, he agrees. He appears in a clean studio, dressed in a gray Zhongshan suit. He speaks softly, carefully, quotes Confucius, smiles rarely. When asked about his reputation, he says, "People think of me as a gangster, but I've only ever believed in balance. Casinos are noisy. I bring quiet." The interviewer laughs nervously. Wan doesn't. That episode breaks viewing records. Bootleg tapes circulate. His myth leaves Macau entirely and begins infecting regional consciousness, and with it comes something Wan had never sought, but always understood: fame. The kind of fame that invites scrutiny. And it won't be long before that spotlight becomes unbearable. The camera doesn't blink, but Macau does. By the start of 1994, something changes in the way the city breathes. You can feel it in the way dealers stack chips with more urgency, how pit bosses glance more frequently at their monitors, how high rollers start asking, subtly, if certain tables are safe. It's not that Wan Kuok-koi has disappeared. He's more visible than ever. And that's precisely the problem. Fame has a price. And in a city where stories once spread in whispers, now they spread in headlines. After his televised interview, the legend of Broken Tooth isn't just local, it's continental. He's known in Hong Kong, whispered about in Taipei, even admired in certain Bangkok circles. His quotes circulate like scripture. Teenagers repeat his lines in pool halls. Taxi drivers call him Chairman Koi. There's even talk of an underground comic series loosely inspired by his life. Wan doesn't flinch, not publicly, but inside the showroom his mood turns sharper. He stops attending certain dinners, declines press inquiries. He even removes several paintings from his office walls, especially one depicting a crane flying alone across stormy waves. When asked why, he only says, no image should outlive its meaning, but outside his windows, Macau grows louder. The casino wars, once a quiet turf dance, have turned into something nastier. Bodies begin appearing, not many, just enough to make the silence after them ring. One dealer is found slumped in his car, a single playing card tucked into his shirt. The 3 of diamonds. Another man, a junket courier, vanishes on a Sunday and turns up Wednesday. Dazed, shoeless, missing one fingernail. He doesn't speak again. Wan, as always, denies involvement. But one night, an audio cassette is slid under the door of a newspaper office. It contains nothing but 45 minutes of silence and a single voice at the end saying, "You chose to hear this." The paper publishes nothing. The editor resigns. Historically, this is the tipping point. Macau's underworld, once manageable and weirdly elegant in its violence, crosses into open chaos. The Portuguese administration is losing grip. The Chinese government is still 2 steps away from involvement. And the space between those governments is filled by men like Wan. Men who don't wait for permission to act. Wan's strategy begins to change. He starts distancing himself from day-to-day triad operations. His old associates handle collections, enforcement, arbitration. Wan turns toward something stranger, something theatrical. He starts filming again. This time it's not a crime drama, it's a biopic. About a man who tries to bring peace to a violent city, only to be hunted by the very system he tried to stabilize. He writes the script himself, funds it through a newly formed shell company, and casts himself once again in the lead. The movie is called The Last Rain Before Summer. It never gets released, but dozens of bootlegs leak within weeks. It features operatic monologues, slow-motion standoffs, and a scene where Wan's character walks through a casino fire barefoot, untouched. Critics mock it, audiences devour it. Many people still think this film was a vanity project, but others believe it was a warning, a prophecy in disguise. So, what do you think? When a man turns his life into fiction, is he trying to confess or conceal? Meanwhile, inside the showroom, there's a new artifact. A massive red and black Go board mounted on the wall. No one is allowed to touch it, but every few days, a piece changes position. Only Wan knows what the board means. A pattern? A countdown? A map? His lieutenants stop asking. Then comes a defining moment, one that shifts the wind entirely. A prominent figure from a rival triad is gunned down in broad daylight outside the Hotel Lisboa's parking garage. The victim had just stepped out of a black Toyota Crown. 2 shots to the chest, 1 to the head. Clean. Fast. The shooter walks away, vanishes. Surveillance footage is mysteriously missing. Everyone suspects Wan. Wan holds a press conference. He appears in a modest suit, no jewelry, no smile. Cameras flash, the room buzzes. He clears his throat and says, "Violence is not in my interest. Prosperity is." Then he bows and leaves. The footage goes viral. TV anchors debate his sincerity. Newspapers print opinion pieces with titles like "Broken Tooth Protector" or "Pretender." One columnist writes, "He looks like a man who knows where all the bones are buried because he arranged the ceremony." Inside his circle, however, things are shifting. Some of his senior lieutenants are beginning to question the plan, the structure, the end game. Wan senses this. He starts scheduling private dinners, not in clubs, but in homes. He visits old friends, makes tea himself, burns incense. He listens more than he speaks. At one of these dinners, a former enforcer breaks down in tears. "I never thought it would go this far," he says. Wan simply replies, "Then you weren't looking far enough." This phrase becomes repeated across his organization as a threat, as reassurance, as gospel. Then comes the twist. In October 1994, Portuguese intelligence, under pressure from multiple factions, including Beijing's emerging interest, places Wan under discreet surveillance. Not wiretaps, not raids, just shadows, watching, waiting. Wan knows. Of course he knows. He begins arriving at restaurants 5 minutes early, leaves through kitchens, changes cars halfway through drives. Not because he's hiding, but because he wants them to know that he knows. He even sends a bottle of expensive Shaoxing wine to the head of Macau's CID unit. The note reads, "For the watchers, may your patience be longer than your leash." No reply. But 2 weeks later, the surveillance team is pulled back. And that silence? Wan reads it as both victory and warning, because he knows what comes next. Visibility isn't safety anymore, and the spotlight, once flattering, is beginning to scorch. By 1995, the name Wan Kuok-koi no longer just echoes through Macau's casino lobbies and alleyway tea shops. It reverberates through the polished offices of bankers, legislators, and intelligence agencies across the Pearl River Delta. His name, or at least his silhouette, appears on more than one diplomatic report. He is, in many ways, a man of multiple realities. A community benefactor, a businessman, a film star, and, to those willing to say it aloud, the most dangerous figure in the city. And yet, he keeps smiling. That chipped front tooth, once an unfortunate street fight souvenir, now has the weight of a dynasty behind it. Inside the showroom, things have changed again. The koi tanks are gone, replaced by low-glow lighting and a full-length silk painting of a tiger emerging from bamboo. The music is quieter. Visitors are fewer, but chosen more carefully. Conversations are shorter, but more charged. Wan has begun to operate like a man preparing for either ascension or extinction. He still moves with elegance, still drinks chrysanthemum tea steeped for exactly 5 minutes, still quotes Chinese poets when discussing junket operations. But the lightness has gone out of his voice. He begins to expect betrayal, not out of paranoia, but pattern. The longer one reigns without real rivals, the more likely new ones will emerge, not from outside, but from within. And there are signs. One of his long-trusted drivers vanishes overnight. No note, no explanation. Wan doesn't send anyone to find him. He simply replaces the driver with a man no one recognizes, young, polite, and silent as polished stone. Another enforcer is caught pocketing from a collections run. The amount is minor, but Wan doesn't ignore it. He invites the man to tea, lets him explain, then quietly transfers him to a desk job in an office that doesn't exist. The man accepts it like a punishment and never appears in public again. Many people still think Wan operated like a cold dictator, but others suggest he was running out of tools for mercy. So what do you think? Can control survive without compassion? Or is it the compassion that rots the foundation? He's also watching the political tides more closely now. With the 1999 handover to China inching closer, Beijing has started sending quiet representatives to Macau. Not diplomats, observers. They meet with casino owners, ask questions, shake hands with businessmen, smile tightly. And they don't come see Wan, not yet, but he knows they will. And so he prepares. He hires new legal advisors, lawyers from Hong Kong who specialize in transitional environments. He reviews his holdings, consolidates shell companies, moves assets from accounts under aliases into more traceable but better protected structures. Not because he wants to go clean, but because he knows how fast the definition of clean is about to change. Then comes the sword, not metaphorical, a real one. He commissions a master blacksmith from Guangdong to forge a replica Tang Dynasty Dao. He doesn't hang it on the wall. He keeps it sheathed beneath the table in his office, right next to his feet. When asked why, he says, "A symbol of restraint is only meaningful if it can cut." His office visitors notice the subtle shift. His meetings become shorter, more direct. There are fewer jokes, fewer cups of tea, and a growing sense that every conversation is being weighed and filed. He starts keeping a notebook. Black leather, no visible markings. Only he knows what's in it. Some believe it holds his network map. Others think it's just poetry. Maybe both. And then, in spring of 1995, he makes a move no one expects. He takes a trip. Wan disappears from Macau for 10 days. No itinerary, no security detail, no explanation. Just gone. When he returns, he says nothing about where he went, but he carries back a box wrapped in red cloth and places it on the center of his desk. He doesn't open it in front of anyone. Later, an associate swears he saw inside. A single calligraphy brush, stained black, and a folded government memo marked "Internal Eyes Only," but no one can confirm it. What follows is a subtle tightening of the web. Wan starts replacing mid-level lieutenants with younger, hungrier faces. He sends his old guard on leave, or grants them honorary roles that keep them away from operations. Some take the demotion gracefully, others vanish. He launches a community campaign, funding park cleanups, temple restorations, and scholarships. His face appears on pamphlets, smiling gently beside phrases like, "Stability is culture. Culture is memory." But underneath the civility, the cracks are growing. Another rival figure, a mid-level boss tied to Wo Xing Wo, is killed outside a KTV club in Taipa. This time, the murder is messy. 2 cars set ablaze. 4 injured. Police intervene. News coverage explodes. Wan isn't linked directly, but he holds a press event the next day, dressed in a white Zhongshan suit, and says, "The chaos we see now is not from old powers. It is from those who never earned them." No one misses the implication. Privately, his inner circle knows he's becoming more isolated. He stops answering certain calls, deletes several numbers from his personal address book, shreds old documents in the middle of the night. A bodyguard later describes seeing Wan sitting alone in his office at 3 a.m., staring at the unlit sword, murmuring a Tang poem under his breath. Even the sharpest blade fears the wind before dawn. That quote never makes the papers, but it becomes lore among his crew. Historically, this was the period when Beijing began signaling its stance on organized crime in the SAR to be. Quiet arrests in Hong Kong, asset seizures, suicides that smelled more like decisions. Wan could feel it all tightening like thread around the neck. And so he begins to pivot again, not away from power, but into myth. He commissions a painter to create an enormous mural for the inside wall of the showroom. It's a surrealist piece. A man standing at the edge of a cliff made of dice, looking down into a sea of gold and ash. No face, no footprints. The mural becomes famous. Tourists try to sneak glimpses. Artists call it Macau's silent scream. Wan never comments, but one day, a visitor finds a note taped to the bottom corner. It reads, "If I leave no shadow, was I even here? The city doesn't know how to answer." Not yet. By late 1995, the air in Macau feels different, heavier, thicker, like the pause before a typhoon. Tourists still crowd the casinos. Lights still blink across the Lisboa's golden dome, and the chip trays still rattle with fortune and failure. But beneath all that, something quieter is shifting. Wan Kuok-koi feels it too, but he doesn't panic. He prepares. The showroom is now a fortress disguised as a lounge. Behind its gold-paneled entry is a second door. Reinforced steel, padded with imported leather to muffle sound. The koi are gone. The calligraphy replaced with a minimalist ink wash of falling leaves. He's cut back his in-person meetings by nearly half. Not out of fear, but efficiency, he tells his aides. The fewer people I speak to, the less I have to remember. He still smiles. But that smile has changed. Gone is the amused elegance. Now it's the tight, knowing curve of someone who's played too many games where the stakes aren't chips, but time. And Macau's time is running out. Beijing's presence in the city is still unofficial, but everyone feels it. Mainland businessmen arrive in black Audis with no license plates. Hotel suites are suddenly booked for inspection. And intelligence officers, dressed like tourists, linger too long near elevators. Wan starts adjusting his posture. Literally, he walks slower, speaks less, blinks more deliberately. It's a subtle shift in performance, like an actor changing characters halfway through a play. He's no longer the charismatic street poet or the casino whisperer. He's becoming something else, an institution. One night, at a private dinner in Cologne, a junior politician leans across the table and asks Wan, "Do you still think you'll be untouchable when the Chinese flag goes up?" Wan pauses, then replies, "A flag cannot wave if the wind refuses to move." It doesn't make immediate sense, but the man writes it down anyway. This becomes Wan's new tactic, ambiguity as protection. He no longer confirms or denies. He implies, he suggests. He plants stories that contradict each other, then watches which ones grow. It confuses everyone, even his rivals, especially his rivals. One of them, a rising figure tied to Sun Yi-on, tries to provoke him publicly, accusing Wan of interfering with debt settlements and monopolizing Macau's lucrative massage parlors. Wan's response? He funds a poetry exhibition at a small cultural center downtown. The theme, words that cannot be rewritten. Inside, the largest piece is a silk scroll with a single character, Ren, Ren meaning endure or restrain. Underneath it, a plaque reads, "To answer a lie with truth is a waste. To answer with silence is strategy." The rival? Found beaten in a public restroom 2 weeks later. Not killed, just humbled. Police launch an investigation. No arrests are made. Many people still think Wan orchestrated these moments personally, but others argue he no longer needed to. His presence was enough to inspire action, even in his absence. So what do you think? When fear operates on its own, is the man behind it still responsible? Meanwhile, Wan's media strategy evolves into something downright cinematic. He begins leaking fragments of his autobiography, not through publishers, through gossip. A line here, a quote there, always secondhand, always unverifiable. One gambler claims he saw Wan writing pages in a cafe, surrounded by bodyguards, sipping coconut water. Another insists the book was never meant to be published, that it was being written solely for one reader, though no one knows who. An underground bookseller begins distributing photocopied chapters, which include a dream sequence about meeting Confucius at a dice table, a parable about a mute fisherman who teaches a city how to lie, a conversation with a ghost in a mirror who demands no reflection. No one knows if Wan actually wrote them, but the voice in them sounds familiar. Quiet, sharp, sad, and the more people read, the more they fear the man behind the fiction. Inside the showroom, the changes continue. Visitors must now pass through 2 layers of security. Phones are collected in lacquered boxes. Every meeting begins with a minute of silence. Not meditation, just stillness. The kind that reveals who fidgets. Wan now refers to his organization not as a triad, not even as a company, but as a rhythm. "The city is offbeat," he says to one lieutenant. "We must set the tempo." And so they do. His team begins monitoring movement, not just of people, but of information. They analyze who's asking questions, who's writing reports, who's visiting which tea shops too frequently. When a low-level informant tries to plant a recording device in one of Wan's meeting rooms, he doesn't disappear. He reappears, working as a busboy in a restaurant where half the clientele are Wan's former enforcers. He lasts 3 days. No one touches him, no one threatens him, but when he leaves Macau entirely. Because sometimes the greatest fear isn't in being punished. It's in knowing exactly when it's coming, and still not being able to stop it. Around this time, rumors swirl that Wan is preparing to step back, that he's grooming a successor, that he's preparing for a public-facing role in the new Macau. Maybe even politics. After all, who better to keep the peace than the man who knows what breaks it? But those rumors are short-lived, because suddenly Wan does something completely out of character. He throws a party, a massive one, hundreds of guests, held at a private venue just outside the city center. Crystal chandeliers, imported wine, violinists flown in from Shanghai. A red carpet stretches from the street to the entrance. The press is not invited, but they show up anyway. Inside, Wan makes no speech. He walks slowly through the crowd, nodding, smiling faintly, accepting toasts. At one point, a guest tries to joke. "Is this your retirement party?" Wan pauses, then says, "It's just a reminder that we're still here." By midnight, most guests are too drunk to remember what they saw. But the few who stay sober recall one strange detail. On the far wall behind the bar hangs a large oil painting. It depicts a tiger, curled up, sleeping beneath a cherry tree. Nothing else. The next morning, the painting is gone, and so is Wan. For 3 days, no one sees him. Some say he left the city. Others say he was holding private talks with mainland agents. A few whisper that he was simply watching from a distance to see who started moving too quickly in his absence. When he finally returns to public view, he's wearing all white. Not mourning, not celebration, something in between. And from that moment forward, Macau senses that Wan Kuok-koi isn't just preparing for something, he's preparing everyone else. As 1996 dawns, Macau's skyline sharpens. Not with new buildings, those have always grown like weeds under neon, but with tension, invisible, palpable, and creeping into spaces even the triads once ignored. There's a sense that the city is standing on one leg, holding its breath, and in the center of it all, Wan Kuok-koi continues to glide through it like smoke, visible yet untouchable. He's cut his public appearances dramatically. No more extravagant dinners, no more cultural events. The man who once courted attention now courts silence. His showroom, still operational, becomes harder to enter. Even trusted visitors wait longer. Background checks tighten. Surveillance cameras inside are repositioned weekly. He's not hiding, he's coiling. Meanwhile, rival factions are growing bold again. Sun Yi-on operatives are spotted in Cologne. Small shootouts flare in alleyways once considered neutral. Anonymous pamphlets begin appearing on telephone poles, warning about a false protector in the city, one who has traded Macau's soul for foreign flattery. Wan's crew doesn't respond, but 3 days later, the printing press responsible for those pamphlets burns down in a wiring accident. Wan's name isn't mentioned. It doesn't have to be. Inside the Triad world, this silence is his signature, but outside, he's shifting once more, from myth to media mogul. After shelving The Last Rain before summer, Wan returns to filmmaking with a new project. This one is different. It's not a gangster epic, not even autobiographical. It's a historical drama set during the Ming Dynasty, about a retired general who builds a temple in secret, hoping his enemies will forget he ever raised a blade. The title, Dust in the Jade Bowl, he funds the production anonymously at first, but the lead actor wears a familiar broken tooth prosthetic, and the soundtrack features a theme called Rua da Felicidade, a melody based on the rhythms of dice being thrown. The subtext isn't subtle. Critics call the film delicate, haunting, and oddly self-indulgent. Audiences devour it. It premieres quietly at a private Macau venue packed with government officials, casino investors, and a handful of Chinese cultural liaisons. Wan doesn't attend, but the credits end with a quote written in simplified Chinese. "The one who builds the bell must also ring it. Interpret it how you like." In real life, Wan is building something else. He begins purchasing property on the outskirts of the city. Warehouses, tea shops, old Portuguese villas in various states of disrepair. Not flashy, but spread wide. Some are in his name, others in that of shell companies based in Zhuhai or Guangzhou. To outsiders, it's a portfolio expansion. To insiders, it's the groundwork for what he calls soft exits. No one knows exactly what that means, but he says it often. He starts using new phrases in private meetings. The ceiling is bending. Too many mirrors in this hallway. Sometimes you must change the script mid-scene. His lieutenants nod, even when they don't understand, because the tone is unmistakable. Wan feels the walls closing in, and then comes the boldest move of all. He launches Broken Tooth Films, Lonely Tees, as a formal production company, registered legally, with an official logo and a studio space just off Avenida de Praia Grande. The company's mission? To explore morality through Chinese cinema. He gives interviews, controlled, soft-spoken, poetic. He says things like, "There's a difference between reputation and legacy. One fades, the other feeds ghosts." When asked if his films glorify crime, he responds, "Do windows glorify the view, or simply let you see it?" The local press swoons, but the real audience is Beijing, and Wan knows it. Historically, 1996 is a critical inflection point for Macau. With just 3 years until the official handover, Beijing's quiet presence becomes firmer. Mainland police begin sharing information with Portuguese authorities. joint task forces form quietly. Visa processes tighten, and unofficial watch lists circulate among border agents. Wan's name is on every one of them. Still, he's untouched. Perhaps because, during this time, he begins receiving guests no one expected. Mid-level cadres from Guangdong, academics with party ties, one or two mainland businessmen with more silence than swagger. They speak in vague terms: national harmony, cultural transitions, the preservation of local stability. Wan listens carefully. He starts referring to Macau as the river town. He compares his role to that of a ferryman, not the captain, not the passenger, but the one who decides when to push off. One night, during a private tea session with a loyal lieutenant, he says, "Everyone is preparing for the rain, but I'm watching the soil." When pressed, he elaborates. Storms pass, but the roots, those either deepen or die. It's around this time he begins writing again. Not scripts, but letters. Dozens of them. Always handwritten. Always sealed with wax. They're delivered across the city and beyond, to casino managers, temple abbots, retired gangsters, and even the editor of a struggling newspaper. The content of the letters is never revealed, but every recipient reacts the same way. They stop speaking publicly about Wan, and in some cases, they disappear from public life entirely. What did the letter say? Many people still think they were confessions. Others believe they were veiled threats. Some say they were invitations to something that still hasn't happened. So what do you think? Can a letter change a city more than a sword ever could? Meanwhile, inside Broken Tooth Film's studio, Wan spends most afternoons alone. Not writing, not directing, watching. He screens old Hong Kong crime films, rewinds specific scenes, studies the body language of villains and heroes alike. At one point, a staffer overhears him whisper to no one, "They never believe the quiet one until it's too late." Then, in early November 1996, he walks into a police station, not under arrest, not escorted, just walks in. He requests to speak with the superintendent, waits patiently in the lobby, sips tea from a vending machine cup. When brought into the room, he smiles and says, "You'll want to watch next summer's premiere. It's the last act." Then he bows and leaves. That meeting goes unreported, but the surveillance on Wan intensifies. His phones click. His mail arrives unsealed. A camera is installed in the light post across from his office. Wan doesn't complain. He simply hangs a large ink scroll in his waiting room. One character, Wang, to watch or to hope, and beneath it, in small calligraphy, "May the eyes that seek also see." For a while things seem calm, but everyone knows better. Macau isn't a city of silence. It's a city of countdowns. And Wan Kuok-koi has already started his. The countdown begins invisibly. No ticking clock, no ominous siren. Just a tightening of the air. The kind you feel before the rain slaps the pavement, but long after the clouds have warned you. In early 1997, Macau doesn't announce that something is coming. It simply stops pretending that something isn't, and Wan Kuok-koi, Broken Tooth, to those who only know the silhouette, begins walking, as if he hears the thunder before anyone else. His movements become minimal. Days go by when he doesn't leave the showroom at all. Meals are delivered by drivers who speak only once. Surveillance cameras are rerouted, not to hide him, but to make it obvious he sees them. It's a performance, not of invisibility, but of invincibility. Inside the showroom, walls have been stripped bare except for one detail. A narrow shelf holding 5 identical books. Black covers, no titles, no one touches them. He's stopped filming. Broken Tooth Films remains operational, technically, but production halts. Editors are reassigned. One assistant reports that all of Wan's notebooks have been locked in a small lacquered chest, marked only with the character for Duan, meaning sever or break. Whatever story he's been writing, he's closing the chapter. Instead, his attention shifts to the games, not metaphorical ones, real ones. Wan becomes a regular fixture in private gambling salons, not to bet, he rarely plays, but to observe. He studies table dynamics, watches how gamblers shift in their chairs, notes which hosts refill drinks too often, tracks how long each guest stays. His presence alters the gravity of the room. Conversations slow, gestures soften. Even dice seem to land differently when he's watching. At one salon, he's asked if he believes in luck. He replies, "Luck is simply the name we give to timing when we forget who created it." That quote finds its way onto postcards, cigarette lighters, even a karaoke bar menu. People start quoting Wan like he's already dead. And maybe, in some sense, he is. At least, the version of him that once sat laughing over shark fin soup or filmed slow-motion sword fights is vanishing. The man now wears only gray or white. The only color is his ring, an obsidian band carved with a dragon so faint you have to squint to see it. In March 1997, a small but significant ripple hits. A Portuguese official's niece is briefly kidnapped outside a popular nightclub. She's found unharmed 3 hours later, but shaken. The incident makes headlines. There's no ransom note, no explanation, no arrests. The official goes silent. 2 days later, Wan appears at a temple in the northern hills, placing incense and leaving a small jade carving shaped like a fish. Reporters spot him, ask questions. He says nothing. But later that evening, a statement is faxed to several newspapers from Broken Tooth Films. Sometimes the river returns what was taken, not because it was wrong, but because the tide has changed. Interpretation becomes obsession. That same week, another junket operator linked to a rival triad vanishes. His office is cleaned out, his apartment empty, his driver suddenly on vacation. One newspaper runs a headline: "The smile that shuts doors." No charges are filed. Many people still think Wan was cleaning house before a transition. Others claim he was provoking one last strike to see who would flinch. So what do you think? Can calm be a trap? If it can, Macau is stepping right into it. Because not everyone is afraid. New money from Hong Kong and Taiwan floods into the junket system. Young gamblers, bold, reckless, social media savvy, begin showing up, bringing noise Wan has never tolerated. Debt collectors from rival networks get sloppy. One is caught beating a man on security camera footage in broad daylight. Wan sends no reply, no public warning. But soon after, one of the offending collector's tattoos is found carved into a fish, hanging on a hook in a downtown market stall. The stall closes, no police visit. The camera footage is lost. Inside the showroom, Wan begins receiving fewer guests, but holding longer meetings. He speaks less, listens more, and ends each session the same way. He walks the guest to the door himself, pauses, and says, "What you owe me is not the favor. It is the memory of being offered one." It becomes the last sentence many ever hear him say in person. That summer, Wan moves residences, not out of fear, but out of boredom. His new home is above a bookstore. The shop sells poetry, incense, and antique cigarette cases. There is no staff. It's rarely open. But deliveries arrive daily, wrapped in newspaper, tied with red twine, marked only with numbers. One package, intercepted by police, contains a chessboard carved with a single move. White bishop to f6, no explanation. But inside a nearby casino, a known 14K associate abruptly resigns the next morning. His name had been on a CID watch list for months. Wan, meanwhile, is writing again. Not scripts, not propaganda. Letters, again. Dozens of them. each sealed with red wax and carried by trusted couriers. Some go to temples, some to journalists, some, allegedly, to men who once ordered his assassination. He refers to them as reminders. When asked, he only says, "A war delayed is still a chapter." Then comes what many call the softest earthquake. In August, a rival triad leader is arrested in Zhuhai by mainland police. He's transferred to Beijing under a national security pretext. No charges announced, no statements issued. His network collapses within a week. Wan's response? He closes the showroom for 5 days, sends all staff on moon leave. When it reopens, everything is different. No furniture, no tea, just a single long table with one object in the center, a metronome, ticking slowly. Visitors are allowed to sit, speak, ask. Wan only listens, then nods, and leaves the room before the metronome stops ticking. This becomes his method. Some see it as madness, others as genius. But one thing is clear. Wan Kuok-koi is no longer fighting to survive. He's building a final shape, a legend that no arrest, no government, no tabloid can fully contain. And on the last day of 1997, as fireworks begin to boom over the harbor in celebration of the new year, Wan is spotted alone on the rooftop of the bookstore. He wears a white tunic, no guards, no entourage, just a cup of tea and a small wooden box resting beside him. A child on the street below claims they saw him lift the lid. Inside, a single coin, flipped once, then caught, and never shown. By early 1998, Macau feels brittle. The kind of brittle that doesn't crack. It shatters. You can see it in the way shopkeepers glance twice before unlocking their gates, and how casino doormen start greeting each other with nods instead of jokes. The streets are still lit with golden glow and cigarette sparks, but the energy has changed. It's not fear, not yet. It's expectation. Everyone is waiting for something to happen, and in the middle of that thickening silence sits Wan Kuok-koi, motionless, watchful, and perfectly poised. He stopped speaking publicly. No more interviews, no press quotes. His last public statement was months ago, scrawled on rice paper and faxed to one paper only. To be visible is not to be seen. To be feared is not to be followed. That page is now framed in the editor's office. Wan's days have become rituals. Morning tea, letters, one walk around the block, always clockwise, one meeting before noon, one visit to the bookstore, where he never buys anything. Then he disappears into his upper room. He's begun wearing white almost exclusively. When asked about it, once by a visiting filmmaker, he simply replied, "Because I am done being read." That quote never makes it to print. Inside the showroom, staff now call him the curtain. Not to his face, of course, but it fits. Because he doesn't block the light, he filters it, softens it, shapes what people see. But make no mistake, the darkness behind it is entirely intact. What very few people know is that Wan has begun recording voice messages, not memos, not commands, stories, parables really. Some are based on ancient texts, others clearly autobiographical. Each less than 5 minutes. No names, no dates, just moods, lessons, warnings. They're not broadcast, they're stored on analog cassettes, dozens of them, kept in a drawer marked with a brass plate. For after. What after means, no one asks. Meanwhile, the casino wars are no longer quiet. Multiple shootings rock Macau in February alone. One takes place inside a hotel ballroom, another in the back office of a loan sharking den. Police respond, of course. Raids, arrests, but always just after the smoke clears. And Wan? He releases nothing, but he starts wearing gloves. Not leather, not black, white cotton, soft, surgical, symbolic. People begin whispering. The gloves mean he's ready. Ready for what? No one knows. Still, His network is tightening. Former rivals seek his endorsement for junket positions. Restaurant owners request his blessing before renovations. Casino bosses send quiet gifts, fruit baskets with encrypted notes. One simply reads, "We've repainted the back staircase. Thank you." There's no reply. He doesn't need to reply anymore, because by now, Wan has become more than a figurehead. He's a tuning fork. When he shifts his weight, the city adjusts. When he smiles, gamblers double down. When he's silent, people reconsider everything they thought they knew. And then, as if to remind everyone that his story is still being written, he does something no one expects. He produces a fashion line. Yes, a clothing line. Minimalist, monochrome pieces, mandarin collar jackets, high-cuffed pants, gloves. The brand name, Tooth and Silence. There's no advertising, no launch event, just a quiet rack in a single boutique. Word spreads. The first run sells out. Some say Wan's pieces are cut from fabric meant for his old suits. Others claim each item includes a hidden character stitched into the lining. Journalists ask for comment. Wan sends a pair of gloves with a note. Fit is a form of truth. And still, the pressure grows. The Portuguese administration, facing mounting criticism for the casino wars, begins preparing high-profile arrests. Coordinated, public, performative, to show control before the handover. Wan's name appears on every internal memo. CID units begin mapping his known locations, watching his bookstore, tracking his known cars. They prepare an arrest warrant, and Wan knows because one day, a CID officer's daughter receives a package at her ballet class. Inside, a pair of white gloves, child-sized. No note, that officer requests reassignment. The arrest date is set for May 1st, 1998. Wan receives the information a week before. Not from an insider, from a stranger, a hotel janitor, who simply slips a matchbox into his hand during one of his rare public outings. Inside the matchbox is a single playing card, the Queen of Spades, burned at the corner. Wan nods and goes home. What happens next is still debated, because on April 30th, he invites a group of longtime associates to the showroom. Not enforcers, not triad bosses, accountants, a translator, his oldest driver. They eat steamed fish and drink tea. No wine. Wan speaks for 45 minutes. No recording exists. But one attendee later claims he said, "The only throne I wanted was the quiet that comes after a story is told." Then he gave each of them an envelope. Inside, one photograph, one pressed flower, and a location written in calligraphy. The next morning, May the 1st, police surround the showroom at dawn. No resistance. Wan is already dressed. White tunic, gloves, polished shoes. He opens the door himself. When asked if he understands why he's being arrested, he replies, "Understanding is never required before timing." He is taken away without incident. Cameras flash, papers roar, and behind him, on the wall where the metronome used to sit, is a new scroll. 3 characters. 语音未了. The echo hasn't finished. Macau goes silent, and the legend becomes law. May 1st, 1998, a date that Macau doesn't forget. Not because it ends something, but because it begins the long echo of a man no longer physically present. Wan Kuok-koi is in custody, yes. The broken tooth has been extracted from public view. But the socket still bleeds power, influence, and unanswered questions. His arrest is textbook, clean, early, and camera-ready. The Portuguese authorities, in rare coordination, sweep the showroom, his apartment above the bookstore, and 2 of his known safe houses. They seize papers, tapes, calligraphy scrolls. One officer claims they found a drawer labeled, "If They Ask." Inside, a single blank page. Wan's processing at the police station is calm. He answers questions when asked, declines a lawyer, smiles for the camera, chipped tooth glinting like it was carved for this very moment. When asked to state his occupation, he writes, "Rhythm consultant." The officer doesn't laugh. The city, however, is in shock. By mid-morning, headlines run across every local paper. Casino kingpin captured. Broken tooth behind bars. Macau's underworld boss falls in dawn raid. But the photos tell a different story, because Wan doesn't look like a man defeated. He looks like a man waiting. Inside his holding cell, clean, fluorescent, bland, he requests 3 things: a pot of chrysanthemum tea, a brush and paper, and a pair of white gloves. He receives none of them. Instead, he receives visitors, lawyers mostly. One cousin, a cultural liaison from the mainland, who says little, just observes. When asked if he'd like to make a public statement, Wan replies, "I've been making one for 20 years. You're just catching up." And with that, the investigation begins. Portuguese prosecutors begin building a case. Illegal gambling, loan sharking, triad involvement, conspiracy to commit violence. They scour his past deals, re-interview former associates, pressure nightclub owners, security guards, taxi drivers. Some talk, most don't. Wan, now confined to a solitary wing of the Cologne prison, settles into routine. Mornings begin with stretching, then writing. He fills small notebooks with what guards describe as columns of characters. Not sentences, not letters, just vertical lines. Dozens of them, each unique. No one knows what they mean. He eats sparingly, refuses red meat, requests plain rice and pickled vegetables, reads only poetry when allowed, and never accepts the radio. He doesn't speak to other inmates. He doesn't need to, because outside the prison walls, his name is gaining a strange kind of immortality. Young men begin showing up at tattoo parlors requesting broken tooth symbols, some etched into their shoulders, others discreetly on their wrists. One artist reports being asked to replicate the exact smile from Wan's mugshot, complete with the tiny scar above his lip. Bars begin selling drinks called the Curtain, dark rum, chrysanthemum syrup, served with a coin balanced on the rim. Casino dealers use his name as shorthand. Another broken tooth play, they say, when a gambler bets everything on a single turn. And his voice? It returns. Weeks after his arrest, cassette tapes begin to circulate. Not radio recordings, not interviews, but those 5-minute parables he recorded in secret. They appear in pawn shops, tucked in envelopes behind tea house counters, mailed to bookstore owners with no return address. The tapes bear no labels, but each contains Wan's voice, low and steady, telling fables about wolves, rivers, absent kings, and masks that cannot be removed. One particularly famous tape ends with, "Power isn't what they take from you. It's what they never knew you left behind." That tape becomes known as the 5th envelope and is replayed at private gatherings all across the city. Meanwhile, in court, things stall. The prosecution struggles to present clear evidence. Witnesses retract statements. Documents mysteriously vanish. It's as if the narrative structure of Wan's empire is too fluid to capture. Many people still think he planned it this way, made his world so mythic that the truth couldn't be proven. So what do you think? If a man erases his fingerprints before touching the glass, did he ever hold it? As the trial date approaches, something unusual happens. One releases a statement, handwritten, sent through his attorney, published in full by the Macau Daily Times. It reads, "You may place me in a cell. You may assign me a name I did not write. But stories, like rivers, do not stop at your dams. They find another way. This is not a defense. This is a continuation." The public response is electric. Protesters don't fill the streets, but people start showing up outside the courthouse wearing white gloves. Silent, still. Some leave flowers, others leave coins. Tails up. Inside prison, Wan continues writing. He refers to his cell as the monastery, requests to speak to no one, refuses to see his old lieutenants. But he does request one guard, an older man, quiet, bookish. They speak once a week, about poetry, about food, never about crime. The guard later tells a reporter he wasn't waiting for a verdict, he was waiting for a moment. And that moment arrives, July 1998. The trial opens. The courtroom is packed. Press from Hong Kong, spectators from as far as Japan. Wan arrives in a plain suit, no tie, hands folded neatly. He pleads not guilty. Over the next 10 days, prosecutors present charts, timelines, witness statements, intercepted calls. Wan says nothing, but on the 11th day, something unusual happens. A former junket operator, one presumed to be in hiding, testifies in Wan's favor. Calm, direct, unafraid. He claims Wan prevented bloodshed, that he enforced debt with diplomacy, that without Wan, Macau would have burned. Gasps echo. The judge silences the room. When asked if he's afraid to testify, the man replies, "Afraid? I've already been protected." The trial continues, but the energy shifts. More witnesses walk back their claims. More documents prove inconclusive. The charges don't collapse, but they soften. In the end, Wan is convicted, but not for conspiracy, not for murder, for illegal gambling and criminal association. A long sentence, yes, but not a life-ending one. He receives 15 years. When asked for a final comment, he says, 15 winners. That's a long meditation. Then he turns and smiles, that chipped, infamous smile. And somewhere, far beyond the prison gates, a cassette begins to play. A voice speaks. Every garden begins with a burial. Prison does not erase Wan Kuok-koi. It reframes him. From the outside, the walls of Cologne Correctional Facility are blank and beige, indifferent to legend. Inside, however, his presence warps the very air. Guards stand straighter. Inmates speak softer. Even the pigeons on the barbed wire seem to avoid his section of the yard. He doesn't take the top bunk. He requests a lower one. Not out of entitlement, but because he believes the floor is closer to silence. He doesn't decorate. No photos. No calligraphy scrolls. Just a wooden stool, a notebook, and a carefully folded towel that never dries completely. His mornings begin the same way. Seated, legs crossed, eyes closed, hands resting on knees. An image of peace so composed, it unsettles the guards more than any tantrum could. The other prisoners call him Lao Koi, Old Koi, not mockingly, but with something close to reverence. He doesn't speak unless spoken to, but when he does, people listen. His advice is always metaphor, always brief. If your cellmate eats with 2 hands, never share a spoon. The loudest apology is the one whispered through a wall. A grudge is a fire that forgets who lit it. He doesn't lead, but he doesn't need to. Wan's influence within the prison system isn't organized, it's organic. If a conflict flares in the laundry room, it fizzles before reaching his block. If someone disrespects a guard, they're quickly isolated, not by staff, but by other inmates. Order follows him, or precedes him. It's hard to say, but he doesn't treat this time as survival. He treats it as preparation, because what many don't realize is that Wan has been planning for solitude. Long before his arrest, he'd built silence into his architecture. Those cassettes. Some are mailed anonymously to media outlets. Others begin circulating on shortwave radio, pirated airwaves broadcasting bedtime fables in his voice. One such recording, titled "The Man with 4 Faces," becomes infamous. It tells the story of a warrior who wears different masks for different cities. until he forgets which one is his real face. The tale ends with the line, "Only the mirror ever knew his name." Listeners debate its meaning for months. Meanwhile, the Macau outside continues to mutate. The casino wars don't end with Wan's arrest, but they lose their composer. Without his steady tempo, violence becomes erratic, less poetic, more desperate. Rival factions fight openly. Police crack down harder. Journalists speculate that Wan's silence is his most powerful act yet, that he's letting the city destroy what he used to manage, just to prove a point. Many people still think Wan's imprisonment was a political decision, a signal to Beijing, a final gesture from the Portuguese before they handed over the keys. So what do you think? If justice is timed, does it still count? Inside, Wan remains unreadable. He receives visitors sparingly. A retired Buddhist monk, a calligrapher from Zhuhai, once even a former casino manager, now disgraced, who sits across from Wan and weeps without explanation. Wan just nods. He writes constantly. Letters, notes, lists. Some are sent, some burned, some folded into paper cranes that the guards later find in the prison garden, fluttering among weeds like forgotten proverbs. At night, he doesn't sleep much. He listens to wind, to dripping pipes, to rats in the walls. Each sound, he once said, was a lesson from the body of the building. He begins teaching, informally. A group of young inmates gather around him during recreation time. He reads them poems, asks questions, tells parables that loop without resolution. He never tells them who he was. They already know. One of them carves the broken tooth symbol into his sandal sole. Another writes a rap using Wan's quotes, smuggled out on toilet paper and uploaded online. A small movement begins outside. They call it Quiet Tide. Not a gang, not a cult, a philosophy. One blog describes it as the art of walking where you cannot be followed. Police investigate, but can't connect it directly to Wan. Of course they can't, because Wan is no longer a person. He's a rhythm that outlasts its drummer. Historically, this period is when the Portuguese administration prepares for full handover. Beijing begins sending more officials. The mainland's legal infrastructure looms over the city like an invisible skyscraper. And yet, there's an odd nostalgia already forming for Wan's version of order. Crime didn't vanish under him, but it moved with grace. Now it stumbles, leaks, bleeds into tourism headlines. The myth of Broken Tooth the Stabilizer grows. In 1999, the official handover occurs. Portugal lowers its flag. China raises its own. Wan remains in prison, watching, listening. When a guard asks what he thinks of the ceremony, he replies, "Flags don't change the wind, they just show it." Around this time, he begins crafting what he calls exit statements, not for parole, for memory. He writes individual letters to dozens of former associates, each one containing a personal detail only they could recognize. The nickname they hated, the smell of the food they once shared, the lie they told that cost someone a finger. No threats, no requests, just acknowledgement. One such letter ends with, "I remember, that's enough." Recipients either frame them or burn them in private. And then, just as his story seems to flatten into legend, Wan surprises everyone again. He releases a book. Not directly. It appears anonymously in a Hong Kong bookshop under the title Conversations with the Curtain. It's a compilation of short prose, half parable, half poetry. Lines like, "A king is just a mirror without glass. If you cannot be followed, you were never truly here. All wounds become eyes if you don't close them." It becomes a cult bestseller. Translated into Japanese, analyzed in university classrooms. One professor calls it post-triad existentialism. Another calls it a coded confession. Wan says nothing. He writes nothing further, at least nothing shared, until one day, guards find a final note taped to his cell wall. 9 characters, old calligraphy style. 我已转身，不留影. I have turned away. I leave no shadow. He's still serving time. Still alive. Still there. But that message? It lands like a full stop, as if he's already gone. And maybe, in some quiet way, he is. There's something ghost-like about the years that follow. Wan Kuok-koi, now several years into his sentence, drifts further from the man people once feared, followed, admired. Not because he's forgotten, but because he becomes untouchable in a different way. No longer a player, no longer the puppet master. He becomes the game board itself. The rules may change. The players may swap seats. But everyone still glances at the board, just in case he moved something they didn't notice. By 2002, Macau has changed hands, flags, and formal tone. The People's Republic of China now governs the territory. Gambling licenses are split among major new players. Big foreign brands, Las Vegas Titans, arrive, ready to inject billions. It feels like a new era, but in the corners of that new shine, the stories remain. And so does the echo of Wan. He doesn't protest his imprisonment, doesn't appeal, doesn't beg for leniency. He just serves quietly. He now teaches calligraphy in the prison's rehabilitation program. His class includes former debt collectors, arsonists, and pickpockets. He assigns them phrases that take weeks to master. Ren, endure, Jing, still, Duan, sévère, Gi, return. His reasoning? The hand must slow before the mind does. He's no longer treated as a threat by staff. He's something else, something more complicated. Officers speak to him with formality. Younger guards are told, "Be careful what you say around cell 203. Not because Wan would retaliate, but because he would remember. That memory becomes his final weapon. One day, a junior officer jokes that Wan probably forgot all the names of the people he used to control. Wan replies, without looking up from his scroll, "Everyone's first favor is marked in my bones. The second is in the ink. The third never arrives." The guard never jokes again. Outside, the world has rebranded him. Documentaries begin airing. Fictionalized dramas use characters clearly inspired by him. Academic papers are written about his soft architecture of authority. One university student writes a thesis titled "The Lingering Smile," myth-making in the late Macau underworld. Wan doesn't respond to interview requests, but he hears about them, and in a rare moment of humor, tells a visiting teacher, "I always thought I'd die young." Now they're writing essays instead. That year, a magazine publishes a long-form article titled "The Shadow That Smiled." It outlines his rise, fall, and what it calls his prison empire. Wan reads it, says nothing. But the next morning, the guards find a scrap of calligraphy in his trash bin. A mirror that reflects only once is still made of glass. Rumors stir that Wan is writing a memoir. He's not. What he's doing instead is far stranger. He's building a dictionary, a private lexicon, each word defined not by its literal meaning, but by its consequence. For example, debt. The first thing remembered, the last thing forgiven. Friend. The witness you never call. Justice. A sound that must echo to be real. Macau. The house that smiled until someone noticed. He shares none of it, but some guards peek, write things down. Years later, fragments of this dictionary appear in underground zines and philosophy blogs. Some believe Wan intended for this. Others think he allowed it simply by doing nothing. Many people still think prison was his end. But the Macau of the early 2000s quietly acknowledges a different truth. Without Wan, The city doesn't feel safer, just newer, because the new triad figures that rise, they're louder, sloppier, less poetic. Where Wan once mediated with silence and implication, they use threats and firebombs. Where he created myths, they post videos. The government cracks down harder. Tourism booms. The streets gleam, but something is missing, and people begin to say so. Even former enemies remark in private that Wan at least understood the rhythm. Then, in 2005, news breaks. Wan's sentence has been reduced. Early release, behavioral credits, health considerations, cooperation. Speculation explodes. What did he trade? Who did he betray? But when reporters reach out, his former lawyer responds with a single fax. He traded nothing. You only believe in trades because you've never lived in stillness. Wan walks out of Cologne prison on a humid morning in July 2005. No crowd, no press. Just one man waiting. His old driver, Silk Wheel, now working for a quiet mainland logistics company. Wan gets in the car, says only, "Window down, please." As they drive, Macau blurs by. Taller buildings, foreign signage, new casinos, loud and glassy. But in the spaces between them, the shadows of old rooftops, the stubborn lanterns still flickering in side streets. There's still a rhythm. He doesn't return to the showroom. He doesn't return to the bookstore. He goes inland, Zhuhai, somewhere quiet. He buys a modest apartment, eats alone, grows orchids on a windowsill. Occasionally, people claim to see him at tea markets. He nods politely, never confirms who he is. Once, a teenager asks, "Are you the man from the stories?" Wan smiles, chipped tooth and all, and says, "Depends on the story." Many people still think his release was a mistake. Others believe it was a final test. So what do you think? If a man learns to become his own echo, does silence ever truly return? The dimness that follows Wan Kuok-koi's release is not silence, it's recalibration. He doesn't vanish entirely, not in the way some expected, evaporating into folklore or hiding in the folds of some anonymous countryside. Instead, he reappears and flickers. A glimpse at a mainland tea auction, a single photograph at a Zhuhai property conference, a shadow passing through a noodle shop where the owner refuses to name the customer, even when bribed. But he's no longer controlling Macau. He's observing it, like a sculptor who's walked away from the clay. At first, authorities monitor him closely. Mainland and SAR intelligence agencies track his banking activity, his phone records, his visitors. But Wan has changed his approach. No more code names, no more rituals. He's turned his tempo down to something nearly imperceptible. It becomes obvious that he's not rebuilding an empire. He's watching his echo ripple through a new city. Because Macau in the mid-2000s is not the place Wan once ruled. It's shinier, richer, but also noisier. The junket world has transformed into a hyper-engineered, quasi-corporate beast. Triad involvement hasn't disappeared, but it's been rebranded. Suits instead of scars, memos instead of machetes. Still, traces of his old system remain. The language of loyalty, the whispers in alleys between pit shifts, the gambling agents who still quote the fifth envelope without knowing where it came from. And Wan, he becomes a phantom advisor, never openly, never contractually, but quietly. One day, a mid-level investor in a struggling VIP club visits Zhuhai. They don't say who they met, only that after returning, they cancel a planned expansion and instead invest in bottled tea. 6 months later, the tea brand takes off. The VIP club collapses. Another man, trying to move illegal chips through a courier network, receives a cassette tape in the mail. No return address. Just the sound of dice rolling for exactly 9 minutes. He shuts down the operation within the hour. Wan doesn't speak to the press. But in 2008, a leaked voice recording surfaces. It's not a confession or even an explanation. It's a meditation on the color white. White holds every shade, he says. It doesn't erase, it absorbs. That's the danger. The quote spreads. Street artists stencil it onto back alleys in Taipa. It becomes a lyric in a Hong Kong rap song. A political columnist references it while discussing Macau's shifting economic identity. Wan has become a watermark, faint, but always beneath the surface. Around this time, reports emerge that he's involved in patriotic business ventures, think tanks, cultural conferences, even cryptocurrency seminars. The public face of these events is clean, organized, full of flags and suits. But attendees note something consistent. The speakers speak in rhythm, slow, measured, almost rehearsed. At one such conference in 2010, a speaker recites a proverb not found in any classical text. The wind that moves no branches still shapes the forest. Everyone in the room knows whose words those are. But Wan is not present, at least not visibly. Meanwhile, his image continues to evolve. In online forums, he becomes a symbol of contradiction. To some, he's the last honorable gangster. To others, a manipulator who polished crime into art. And to a growing segment of disaffected youth, he's a case study in how to walk without echo. This last group is perhaps the strangest. They call themselves unseen teeth. They don't commit crimes. They don't protest. They just refuse visibility. No social media. No full-face photos. No public location check-ins. They cite Wan as their template for erasure. Academics scoff. But security agencies take note. One internal report from 2011 reads, "Subject exhibits non-organizational influence across multiple domains. Cultural, not structural. Difficult to counter. Soft destabilization potential." The subject? Wan Kuok-koi. Back in Zhuhai, he tends to his orchids. He drinks tea. He writes on scrolls that are later burned. Occasionally, he attends private dinners. Those who meet him say he speaks less than ever, but his eyes are sharper. One guest, a scholar from Fujian, describes sitting with him for an hour. They spoke only once. Wan asked, "When you finish writing, where does the ink go?" The scholar had no answer. Wan simply smiled, and the meeting ended. By 2012, Wan is officially off every watch list, but unofficially, he's a topic of endless debate. Some claim he's still pulling strings behind certain mainland tech firms. Others believe he's advising nationalist ventures quietly building digital surveillance tools. There's no proof, just tone, tempo, style. And style, as Wan once said, is the one fingerprint no one thinks to erase. Then comes the surprise. He files a trademark under the name Koi Dynamics Limited. The logo, a tooth, cracked but upright. The company claims to produce leadership training materials. Their videos are bizarre. Shadowy instructors delivering abstract lessons in ethics, decision-making, and asymmetrical communication. One video, The Mirror Room, features a man walking through a hall of reflections, none of which match his movements. Critics call it nonsense, others call it prophecy. It doesn't matter, because it spreads. The brand appears in startup circles. Some treat it like satire. Others buy the manuals and swear by them. One high-level executive of a Southeast Asian logistics firm reportedly keeps a coin marked KT on his desk, flipping it before major decisions. Many people still think this is just Wan's vanity project, but others suspect it's something else, a system, not criminal, not even hierarchical, just patterned. So what do you think? Can a legend rebuild itself through the rituals of language and pace? Can a ghost write software? Can a tooth become a tuning fork? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear. Wan Kuok-koi is no longer chasing power. He's shaping how others chase it. And in the quiet, just before sleep takes hold, you can almost hear the dice roll. It's strange how some names begin to lose their weight in the headlines, even as they gain it in the walls of a room. By 2014, Wan Kuok-koi is rarely mentioned by journalists anymore. His past is recounted in retrospectives. His name appears in footnotes, not banners. He's listed in academic indexes about non-state influence in transition economies, and quoted in obscure forums discussing applied silence. But among the men who move money through invisible channels, and the ones who still live by unwritten codes, Wan is still an orientation point, not a destination, a compass needle. In Macau, his physical influence is almost gone. He owns no clubs, runs no casinos, and collects no debts. The streets he once curated like poetry are now bustling with digital surveillance, foreign gamblers, and plastic neon too bright to dream beneath. But his format lingers. Security firms still rotate shifts every 77 minutes, an odd number, a relic from his old routines. VIP junket rooms still use incense before a big play. Some blackjack tables still leave the Queen of Spades face up in the discard tray. Quiet homage. And at least 3 mid-level Triad crews refuse to utter his name directly. They call him the man behind the fourth wall, because breaking the fourth wall was always his trick. Even now, it's unclear if we're watching him or if he's still watching us. Around this time, whispers start to rise again. Not in Macau, in Southeast Asia. First, in Malaysia, a company known for government-adjacent logistics quietly restructures its board. One of the new advisors is never named, but meeting notes refer to K consultant. When leaked, the term sparks interest. Wan is never linked officially. Then, in the Philippines, a cryptocurrency conference includes an unannounced guest. No photo, but a blurry security cam still makes the rounds online. A man in a white tunic. No entourage. Gloved hands. Internet forums explode. One commenter writes, "He's not retired, he's rewritten," and the idea spreads. Wan is no longer treated like a former gangster. He's now an algorithm, a concept. What began with cassettes and calligraphy has mutated into something far stranger. A philosophy of power distribution through narrative disruption. His teachings, once parables in smoky rooms, are now abstracted into business modules and leadership seminars across Asia. One company brands its method asymmetric visibility, based on the principle that being partially seen is more effective than being fully present. Its founder, a former marketing executive from Macau. Wan still says nothing. But in 2015, something remarkable happens. A mural appears on a warehouse wall in Phnom Penh. It's massive, 2 stories tall. It shows a koi fish swimming against a tide of poker chips, dice, and cracked porcelain masks. One fin is chipped. The eye, just a black dot, is positioned where a broken tooth might be. There's no signature, but locals start calling the building the Smile House. The Cambodian government paints over it in a week. Photos survive. Back in China, Wan is said to be living quietly. Some claim he's in Hainan, others say Fujian. A few insist he returned to Macau secretly under a new identity. But all agree on one thing: he hasn't stopped writing. In 2016, a book is published anonymously under the title Rain Before Silence. It's fiction, or claims to be. A novel told in fragmented scenes. A boy loses a tooth during a street fight, then grows up shaping the tempo of a city no one fully controls. It's part poem, part noir, part warning. The prose is tight, gentle, weighted. Wan is never named, but the first page reads, "I never wanted a throne. I wanted the room to fall silent when I entered." The rest was noise. Scholars debate it. Collectors trade it. The book is banned in several Chinese provinces, but digital copies leak anyway. Meanwhile, in business circles, Wan's influence shows up in stranger places. At a Beijing fintech summit, a speaker credits broken tooth theorem as their guiding principle in decentralized leadership. In Hong Kong, A risk management firm trains executives using case studies based on Wan's old tactics, though his name is redacted and replaced with the mediator, and yet the man himself, still quiet, still absent. Until one day in 2017, a video appears, 90 seconds, low resolution, grainy. A man sits alone in a room of lanterns, hands folded, white gloves resting on his lap. He stares at the camera, says nothing. Then, at the 88-second mark, he lifts one hand and draws a slow circle on the table. Black screen, no title. It's uploaded from an untraceable account, then disappears, but not before it's copied, reposted, analyzed. Forum threads call it the Wan loop. Some think it's a code, others think it's nothing. But the power lies in the uncertainty, because even now, decades after his peak, years after his so-called fall, Wan Kuok-koi is still causing people to ask the one question that undid his enemies. Is that him? And that's the trick, isn't it? The fourth wall never needed to be broken. It just needed to breathe. So what do you think? If a man becomes an idea, can you ever arrest him again? Or is he already somewhere else, drawing circles in silence? By 2018, what remains of Wan Kuok-koi isn't a man, but a network of misread signals. He's no longer just a historical figure in Macau's underworld history, no longer only the mythic broken tooth. He's a name you don't say on record, a design choice in a conference room, a principle whispered across military academies and business schools with no context but full reverence. And yet he lives, not as a fugitive nor a martyr, simply unconfirmed. Publicly, he's still considered a retired figure, somewhere in mainland China, under loose observation. But those close to certain operations, those who deal in risk, leverage, and silence, know better than to assume disappearance means disinterest. In Southeast Asia, his legend resurfaces in new forms. A cybersecurity startup in Singapore operates under the acronym KTSS, Koi Tactical Silence Systems. Its co-founder is a former junket liaison. Their primary product? An AI protocol that detects ambient tension in multi-actor rooms. Its architecture mimics Wan's method of reading people at fan halls. He is never acknowledged in their literature. But the internal training manual includes the phrase, "Fear isn't what follows threat, it's what walks in before it." Word for word, one of Wan's old sayings. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, a set of underground leadership seminars emerges. Known only as the Mirror Room, participants are blindfolded for the first 20 minutes of each session. The philosophy? Perception before presence. The course materials include abstract writings on tempo as control, visibility denial, and encoding influence through anecdote. No author is listed, but the introduction refers to the speaker as the absent strategist. And then quite suddenly Wan speaks again, not with his voice, not with a camera, with a letter. In March 2019, a major regional news outlet receives a sealed envelope with no return address. Inside is a folded scroll, inked in black with immaculate brush technique. One phrase, "The house is quiet, but the floorboards still remember," accompanied by a photograph of a white glove, a Queen of Spades playing card, and a cassette tape. The tape contains no audio, just the mechanical whir of a cassette running for 9 minutes, then stopping. The editor chooses not to publish the letter directly, but he tells colleagues, this wasn't nostalgia, it was alignment, because days later, a triad conflict in Macau ends with sudden resolution. Brokered, it's whispered, by a third party from across the water. No arrests, no statement, just quiet. The Wan format, as it's now called in certain policy briefings, is referenced as a case study in passive reintervention, how to reshape power dynamics without appearing. And it's not just the underworld or soft power brokers who study him now. Military academies, yes, military academies, begin citing his behavioral playbook for asymmetric influence, not for violence, for managing perception, control through misdirection, and cultural myth construction. One major regional government think tank dedicates an entire panel to legend as infrastructure. Guess who the keynote is about? Wan doesn't attend. But the backdrop behind the stage is a stylized koi, swimming beneath falling petals shaped like tooth fragments. No caption, and the audience doesn't need one. Meanwhile, within more esoteric circles, the tape rumors return. Digital recreations of lost Wan cassettes circulate on private servers. Tracks titled, "The Door Before the Door," "When the Knife Waits Too Long," Chapter 77, "Erased." They're mostly ambient noise. Footsteps, dice rolling, teacups being placed down, faint wind chimes. But for a certain crowd, they are gospel, played before meetings, embedded into videos, sampled in lo-fi hip-hop compilations labeled Triad loops. Is any of it real? No one knows, and no one dares to say definitely not. Because just when it feels like Wan might fade into comfortable myth, a new development emerges, a patent filed in Hong Kong for a multi-sensory immersion capsule. The applicant? KT Advisory Group, Macau. The document lists a series of influence environments, controlled spaces where lighting, scent, tempo, and dialogue pacing are regulated to produce desired outcomes in negotiations. Page 3 of the filing includes a sample conversation template. It begins with, "What you feel now is not pressure, it is gravity shifting." Classic Wan, not quoted, just echoed. Quietly, governments begin monitoring KT Advisory's affiliations. They find no direct links, no signatures, but multiple shareholders trace back to once defunct shell companies from the 1990s, companies that were originally connected to, you guessed it, Broken Tooth Films, lauded. One by one, they dissolve, and in their place, newer, cleaner, sharper entities with branding that includes koi fish, white gloves, 3 dots arranged in a triangle, the same pattern Wan allegedly once carved into his office desk with a fountain pen. Many people still think this is nothing but nostalgia weaponized. Others suspect it's a living operation. So what do you think? Can influence become software? Can an idea, once tuned to the right silence, live forever in the nervous laughter before a meeting begins? In a room of people looking around trying to figure out who really controls the room? Because whether Wan is alive, watching, or simply remembered, he's still setting tempo, and the world still catching its breath. By 2020, it no longer matters if Wan Kuok-koi is in the room, because every room behaves as if he might be. There's a new term that begins to circulate, not in headlines, not in books, but in whispered conversations among executives, negotiators, underworld liaisons, and intelligence analysts. They call it the tooth pause. It refers to that split-second hesitation before someone speaks in a high-stakes meeting. Not fear, not uncertainty, just calculation, an instinctive review of power structure, implications, timing, and rhythm. No one teaches it, no one names it aloud, but those who've studied Wan's legacy know what it means, and those who haven't, they're already behind. In Macau, the skyline glitters with architectural ambition. Casino towers reach skyward, polished and glimmering, owned now by foreign consortia and mainland firms that never knew the old names. The triads have adapted, smarter, faster, layered in bureaucracy and contracts. The scent of violence is faint, but it lingers. Underneath it all, old mechanics pulse, subtle gestures in negotiation rooms, the way incense is still burned in side offices before an acquisition. The continued presence of the Queen of Spades card, slipped beneath keyboards or stashed behind picture frames. These aren't superstitions. They're relics. Relics of the man whose tempo once dictated the breathing of a city, and now his timing is everywhere. Across Asia, businesses whisper about consultants who don't advertise, who arrive with no slides, no proposals, only questions. The first one always being, do you control the silence in your own room? They don't name him. They never say Wan, but the symbols remain. In Thailand, a political aide is dismissed after quoting from Rain Before Silence during a televised debate. In Singapore, a minor tech startup explodes in valuation after investors discover its pitch deck includes influence design strategies derived from the mirror room philosophy. In Indonesia, a controversial figure disappears from the public eye after reportedly receiving a cassette-shaped USB drive with a koi fish engraved on one side. The world has gone digital, but Wan's analog ghosts have adapted. It's no longer about triads, turf wars, or blood on pavement. It's about narrative choreography. It's about teaching the next generation that control doesn't come from declarations. It comes from implication. A journalist from Japan releases a documentary titled Macau's Last Smile, tracing Wan's rise, fall, and post-prison silence. The final scene is shot from a drone, hovering over Cologne prison. It descends slowly, pausing as it frames the old stone path where Wan walked out years ago. The narration ends with, "He left the door, but not the room." It wins a regional award, but more importantly, it trends. Young entrepreneurs start quoting him on social media, turning his sayings into branded aesthetics. One viral post, "He didn't need to speak. The room made space for his quiet." Teenagers, unaware of his full past, post-edited clips of koi fish looping between casino floors. The caption, "Broken Tooth Vibes." It becomes a meme, and in time, a mood board category, which is both absurd and perfect, because if Wan ever understood anything, it was the value of contradiction. Meanwhile, in Beijing, a private forum of regional security thinkers gathers to discuss non-linear influence operations. One speaker, an old intelligence officer, brings a printout of an alleged Wan quote, "The loudest man at the table has already lost," unless he's waiting to make everyone else stop breathing. He sets it down, waits. No one speaks for 20 seconds. Not out of fear, out of protocol. Wan's protocol. In Zhuhai, where some believe he still lives, a building with tinted windows and no signage operates with minimal staff and maximum discretion. The only recurring delivery? Fresh ink and rice paper. Neighbors say the same man collects them every week. Short, trim, wears gloves. A foreign student once tried to interview him, offering a stipend and full anonymity. He received a single note in reply. "The story you seek is already shaping you. Choose carefully who finishes it." There is no return address. 2020 ends in global silence. The world has shifted. Pandemics, closures, a quiet kind of global trauma. But in Macau, the city reopens with fanfare. Its heartbeat resumes. The roulette wheels spin again. But now, the dealers are trained not just in odds and house rules, but in tone, in timing. A new phrase emerges in the employee handbook of a major casino conglomerate. If a guest controls the silence, respect their rhythm. They might not be here to gamble. Someone asks HR where the phrase came from. They reply, "Legacy protocol," and elsewhere, Wan continues to glide between the visible and the vanished. Occasionally, a blurry photo will emerge, usually from behind, often mistaken. A man entering a tea house, a figure walking near a calligraphy shop. Each time, the caption is the same. Is this him? Many people still think the legend has outgrown the man, but maybe the legend was the man all along. So what do you think? If you can build power from a whisper, do you ever really fade? Or do you simply become the silence others whisper into? The world shifts again in 2021. Global economies wobble, and even the steadiest institutions begin searching for newer kinds of leadership. Leaner, quieter, more instinctive. It's no longer about grand strategy or bold declarations. It's about who can keep a room still. And Wan Kuok-koi's legacy, if you can still call it that, slides back into relevance, not as a person, not even as a myth, but as an architecture of control. Somewhere between folklore and executive policy, his playbook becomes invisible ink on the walls of boardrooms, back channels, and even policy meetings. The man who once ruled back alleys now holds court in presence gaps, the pauses between decision and action. In Macau, he remains an unspoken force. New casino magnates, many mainland connected, dominate the industry. But occasionally, you'll see the younger ones hesitate before announcing a new expansion. They check the temperature, the tone, the tempo. It's not just market analysis. It's the Wan calibration, and it's not limited to gambling. In Shanghai, a luxury brand CEO walks away from a lucrative joint venture. No public reason, but a leaked email shows the final message came from a burner account. Subject line: teeth last longer than gold. That same week, the partner company's stock drops 11%. In Hong Kong, a financial influencer uploads a video breaking down Wan's 4 principles, sourced entirely from scattered quotes, trial testimony, and alleged internal monologues. Control the tempo. Disappear before you're needed. Let your absence speak. Make others wonder if you've already won. It garners 3 million views in a month. Comments are filled with strange responses. I lit incense before watching this. He made me look around the room. Anyone else hear dice at 3:33? It becomes a digital seance, and in mainland China, silence surrounds him again. But a different kind. Not avoidance, not suppression. Respect. Some call it the velvet disappearance. His name doesn't trigger red flags anymore. He's not mentioned in briefings, not flagged in audits, not because he's innocent, but because he's unclassifiable. In mid-2021, a mysterious conference is held in Shenzhen under the guise of a fintech ethics symposium. The keynote speaker is never named. No recordings are permitted. Attendees sign waivers. The only leaked detail? A white glove placed atop the podium before the session began. Some swear it was him. Others believe it was theater. But one attendee, an old-school negotiator from Taiwan, summarizes the event like this. He didn't need to speak. The air told us everything. Elsewhere, people are building businesses on his ghost. A VR design firm in Seoul introduces an immersive negotiation simulator based on Broken Tooth's boardroom silence. Players must achieve their goals without speaking, only using gestures, eye movement, and silence. The game wins awards. A meditation app includes a soundscape titled Macau 3 a.m. It features distant dice rolls, soft Cantonese whispers, and a voice saying, "Do not ask if you are ready. Ask if they are." It becomes popular with executives, diplomats, and chess players. None of it is officially connected to Wan, but the shape of his influence is clear. He no longer controls casinos. He controls metaphor. 2021 also marks a strange turn in his own reappearance. That summer, a blurry video surfaces. A man in Zhuhai standing beside a koi pond, tossing stones across the surface. The footage is poor, but something in the posture, the rhythm of the hand, the tilt of the head, it feels familiar. The person filming says nothing. The man in white never turns. Then, just before the video ends, he tosses one final stone. It skips once, then twice, then sinks. The hand lowers, and the video cuts out. No caption, no credit. Within hours, the video is pulled from Chinese platforms. But on Telegram, it spreads like fire. Commenters post only one phrase. He's still counting skips. Then at year's end, a book arrives, privately published, titled simply 77. No author. But every page is a single sentence. Riddles, observations, memoranda of mood. One reads, "Some men are guns, others are safeties." Another, "The Queen of Spades doesn't take prisoners. She waits." The book circulates in corporate gift baskets. One Hong Kong shipping conglomerate allegedly gives it to all its new executives with a note. This isn't required reading. It's required presence. Again, no proof it's Wan's work, but everyone treats it like scripture. Even government agencies begin archiving these cultural ripples under a new classification, narrative operators. One internal document states, Subject BT has shifted from underworld figure to behavioral archetype. Influence is now mimetic, monitored via symbolic channels. The memo never names him, but BT is more than enough. So what do you think? If a man dissolves into symbol, but the symbol starts shaping reality, isn't he still in control? He doesn't walk Macau anymore, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the new frontier of power isn't movement, but memory, and in every pause, every hesitation, every glance toward the shadows. Wan Kuok-koi walks again. It's now 2022, and in a world dominated by digital noise, the weight of silence has never been heavier. And those who master that silence, they don't run companies. They don't lead nations. They shape climates. Wan Kuok-koi, or what remains of him, is no longer a historical figure confined to Macau's 1990s gangland. He is now taught, without name, without attribution, as an example of signal-based leadership. He's studied in think tanks, mimicked in boardrooms, and admired in places where ambition often dies in bright lights. Wan survived because he understood one thing better than anyone. Presence isn't about being seen, it's about being sensed. That year, at a defense symposium in Tokyo, a lecturer unveils a theory of phantom strategy. It's defined as a framework wherein a person or entity builds power not by exertion, but by being calculated into every equation. The case study? An unnamed Macau triad figure who once brokered peace not with threats, but with reputation. Attendees know who it is. No one says the name. Elsewhere, the Wan signature resurfaces in increasingly obscure forms. In Bangkok, a small hotel lobby displays a koi tank with exactly 7 fish. The concierge greets guests with a quiet bow and the phrase, "balance before question." When asked about the phrase's origin, the manager only says, "It's part of the ambiance." In Taiwan, a ghostwriter for a rising politician allegedly receives a set of handwritten notes in an unmarked envelope. Each page contains a quote, some direct, some coded. One reads, "To survive exposure, train like a shadow." Another, "The louder they laugh, the closer you are." She uses them as inspiration for a public speech that gets standing ovations. Later, she admits the material came from an old friend in the quiet trade. And across online communities, the Wan tactic becomes a meme among introverts, influencers, and silent strategists alike. A TikTok trend emerges. People film themselves entering a room and saying nothing, just looking around. Then a caption appears, the broken tooth entry. It garners millions of views, half ironic, half reverent. Meanwhile, in China, rumors intensify. Several tech companies begin removing koi imagery from their branding. One executive, off the record, says it's to avoid associations. When pressed, he says nothing, but glances at the framed Queen of Spades behind his desk. In the borderlands near Zhuhai, a luxury tea house opens. No signage, no advertising, appointments only. The waiting room has only one chair, one table, one tape deck playing a looped recording of porcelain being set on wood. Some claim Wan himself visits once a week, always entering through the back. Others say the whole setup is an elaborate hoax, a performance piece dedicated to legacy and misdirection. But does it matter? Because here's the truth. The performance is the power. Wan's enduring presence, if you can still call it that, is now reinforced, not through appearance, but possibility. The possibility that he's watching, that he's listening, that he already knows what you're thinking. There's power in that ambiguity, and businesses have begun to monetize it. In Singapore, a private equity firm launches a course titled Cloakroom Psychology, a method of client negotiation built around mimicking broken tooth's quiet posture. Graduates receive a white glove in a black box. Inside, a card. This isn't a symbol, it's a mirror. No attribution, no logo. Yet, the waiting list for the course stretches to next year. Scholars now debate whether Wan's power was ever criminal at all. One Oxford paper argues, the cultural utility of fear is misunderstood. Wan Kuok-koi did not rule by terror, but by anticipation. He wasn't a gangster, He was an emotional architect. It sparks controversy, but the paper wins an award. In Macau, the city pretends to have forgotten him. The casinos are shinier, the surveillance tighter, the junkets gone or absorbed into bland legality. But old cab drivers still tell stories if you pay in cash. They'll point out an alley and whisper, "That was his shortcut." They'll show you a corner bar and say, "He left a tape there once." Just a blank. One driver, grizzled and sunburnt, laughs softly as he recalls Juan walking past a Portuguese mayor once, saying nothing, and still getting a favor 2 days later. He didn't need to speak. The city did it for him. 2022 is also the year a statue appears in Manila. A koi, leaping from marble waves. At the base, a small plaque. To the man who never arrived, but was always here. Authorities deny any knowledge of its commission. Within a week, it's removed, but images survive. Because Juan's true monument isn't made of stone. It's made of posture, inference, and learned caution. So what do you think? Is he still out there? Pulling strings, curating echoes, drawing slow circles on blank tables? Or is he simply the ghost story we tell ourselves before walking into difficult rooms? Either way, his silence remains the loudest thing in the building. By the time 2023 rolls in, the name Wan Kuok-koi has officially disappeared from most searchable records. Not erased, just folded into allegories, into footnotes of whispered lectures, into the soft-spoken protocols of risk management. His presence is no longer textual, it's contextual, not written but inferred, not found but felt. And somehow, this makes him more powerful than ever. This year, something curious happens across Southeast Asia. Executives, consultants, and mid-tier government operatives begin referencing a document they all seem to know, yet no one has officially seen. They call it the Seventh Smile. No one can verify its origin. Some say it's a compilation of philosophies attributed to Wan. Others claim it's a modern forgery written by a disciple or imitator. A few insist it was found in a hidden drawer inside an old casino office, left behind when the property changed hands. What matters is how seriously people take it. Page 1 contains just a sentence. The first 6 smiles are visible. The 7th is when you look down and realize you're no longer in control. Within months, the document spreads, not on websites or news feeds, but via encrypted PDFs, passed from one hand to another at business retreats, discreetly gifted during dinners, or tucked inside folders at high-level offsites. One Hong Kong risk strategist calls it the most lucid guide to reputational dominance I've ever read. It's banned in several corporate environments for being non-compliant with formal governance doctrine. But you know what that does. It only makes it more essential. Meanwhile, in mainland China, talk about Wan is reduced to ciphered phrases. At an economic summit in Guangzhou, a panel on legacy leadership models includes a subtle dig. Some legacies are heavy because they're carried in silence. The audience doesn't applaud, but 3 people nod, very slowly. A few days later, a corporate pamphlet circulates among attendees. Cover, a koi leaping over a shadowed skyline. Inside, a single-page quote. No author. "I didn't build an empire. I built a rhythm. The man who once wielded knives and dice is now repackaged as a tempo framework, and the more the world digitizes, the more people long for something analog, something physical, something ceremonial." So of course that's where Wan reemerges. Through ritual, a series of high-stakes consulting firms begins offering something called the absence room, a negotiation practice method where a seat is left deliberately empty at the table. The idea, you learn to make decisions in the presence of imagined oversight. Executives who undergo the training report strange effects. They lower their voices. They pause more often. They stop interrupting. They start asking why someone is quiet before assuming agreement. Many people still think these techniques are just glorified mindfulness, but others know better. They know who inspired it. In Macau itself, the echoes are more physical. A small sculpture garden opens behind an old colonial building. 4 koi fish carved in wood, arranged in a slow circle. Tourists pass it without a second glance. Locals call it the breathing pond. Each carving's eyes are blank, but when you stand in the center, you can't shake the feeling that one of them might be watching. Elsewhere, artists take up his image, carefully, abstractly. An underground hip-hop artist in Manila releases an EP called Teeth in the Wind. One track samples an old casino surveillance beep and overlays it with whispers. Don't raise your voice, raise your presence. The track goes viral. In Singapore, a theater troupe stages a one-man show called Chair 77. The actor never speaks. He simply sits, rearranges poker chips on a table, and looks into the audience. After 90 minutes, he walks off stage. The audience, reportedly, does not move for several minutes. Wan's image is never shown. But when asked who it was about, the director replies, "Oh, he never showed up. He just taught us how to leave space." And while the world continues its messy dance, wars, crashes, media frenzies, Wan's quiet tempo marches on, unseen, uncluttered, untouched, until one day, in late 2023, a truly strange artifact appears. At a used bookstore in Taiwan, a clerk finds a small black box mixed in with the philosophy section. No title. Inside, a cassette tape, a deck of playing cards, a single page of rice paper with a quote. The final move is no move at all. No one claims it. But that week, a former Triad associate, long out of the game, is found sitting at his garden table in Zhuhai, sipping tea. He's smiling. When asked what's funny, he simply says, "He mailed me silence." He doesn't elaborate. So what do you think? Can legacy be engineered like architecture? Can a man disappear so thoroughly that only his pause remains? And when that pause makes a billion-dollar company hold its breath? Was he ever really gone? Wan Kuok-koi may no longer walk the streets, but somewhere, the tape is still turning. As 2024 unfolds, the silence Wan Kuok-koi left behind has matured into something else entirely. Not absence, but influence infrastructure. Across Asia, the question is no longer where is he, but how deep did he embed? The answer? Deeper than anyone expected. Take the example of Project Stillwater, a conflict resolution initiative quietly funded by a group of anonymous donors in Singapore. The program trains negotiators to de-escalate corporate and geopolitical tensions through pacing, spatial design, and controlled silence. The lead instructor? A former Macau casino liaison with no official credentials, but one unmistakable mantra: silence doesn't hide the blade, it becomes it. Sound familiar? Graduates are instructed to watch old footage, not of Wan himself, but of rooms he was rumored to have entered. The goal is not to study him, but to feel what changed when he was near. You begin to understand. His power wasn't just fear, it was choreography. Meanwhile, in Jakarta, a luxury watchmaker releases a limited edition line called the 77 Collection. Each watch ticks audibly, an intentional design meant to slow the wearer's decisions. The tagline? Measured not in seconds, but silences. Collectors notice something strange. Each model ships with a card. A koi fish inked in gold, swimming in a loop. No brand name, no explanation. But in certain circles, that symbol is enough. In Hong Kong, an art exhibit titled Echoes Before Voice features minimalist installations, empty chairs, slowly dripping teacups, and recordings of ambient casino sounds at 2:01 a.m. The final room has no sound, just dim lighting and a faint scent of burnt incense. Visitors report a strange sensation, like someone is standing just behind them. One critic writes, "It's less an exhibit, more a haunting. You don't look at it, you submit to it." No artist is credited, but the exhibit's guestbook contains a single signature traced in black ink. The Queen of Spades. Some think it's performance art, others think it's a soft signature, because in Wan's world, even an ellipsis has weight. Elsewhere, something subtler stirs. A South Korean intelligence report, later leaked online, classifies Wan Kuok-koi as a Category S echo figure. That is, someone whose direct activity has ceased, but whose strategic echo continues to influence regional behavior. The document outlines 5 symptoms of a Category S echo. Rituals form around the absent party. Power is ceded based on implication, not command. Multiple factions claim private alignment, despite no contact. Cultural products reference the figure without name. Silence around the subject increases with proximity to power. One matches all 5. And when the leak hits Reddit, a user comments, "He's not missing. He's meditating behind everyone's strategy." Some laugh, but others recognize the deeper truth. Wan has redefined the endgame. He's not in hiding. He's in circulation. By mid-2024, new leadership programs begin referencing the Wan tier, a level of executive presence in which one no longer leads by direction, but by gravity. You don't instruct, you alter the tempo. One Japanese firm adopts a company-wide protocol. If your silence carries no consequence, speak. It's attributed to internal guidance, but in an internal memo, an HR director calls it our broken tooth doctrine. Meanwhile, in the alleyways of old Macau, kids play with plastic cards printed with koi patterns. They trade quotes like baseball stats. He paused before the 4th bet. That's why the table flipped. The smile he gave at the door? That was move 7. They don't know who he is, but they act like they do. And in that unknowing, Wan wins again. In the Philippines, a luxury resort offers a VIP silent suite modeled after what they believe was Wan's private parlor in 1997. Guests sit alone for 1 hour. No electronics, no clocks, just slow dimming lights and a soft hum of wind chimes. Many leave shaken, not afraid, awake. Back in Zhuhai sighting Spike, a man in white, always with gloves. Never the same exact face, but always the same energy. Rooms hush when he enters. Conversations stall. He orders tea, leaves nothing but the scent of sandalwood behind. And every time someone whispers, "He didn't die, he refined," many people still think all this is coincidence, fabricated aura, romanticized myth. So what do you think? When even children feel your tempo, when executive behavior shifts in your ghost's image, when your absence is studied as method, isn't that presence? He doesn't need to return. He just needs you to wonder, what would he do now? And in that wondering, he acts. He slows the decision. He makes the sharp tongue falter. He tips the balance, not with touch, but with the idea of touch. He isn't a man anymore. He's the space between men. He's not forgotten. He's foundational. And every breath held in doubt, that's him, still shaping the room, still counting the skips. By 2025, Wan Kuok-koi is no longer a man with a biography. He's a presence with a mythology. His name doesn't trend. His face doesn't reappear. And yet, his influence? It sits at the end of every boardroom table that feels too quiet. It lingers in the moment before someone answers a question that wasn't asked. It hums beneath the surface when power exchanges hands, without a sound. In universities, a new interdisciplinary field emerges: narrative influence mechanics. Some call it strategic folklore, others legacy architecture. But in every syllabus, no matter how abstract, there's a ghost watermark. Wan. One graduate-level seminar poses a final exam question. Design a negotiation strategy where your opponent does not realize they've already agreed. Half the class turns in essays titled The Seventh Smile. In the corporate world, internal memos begin using coded references. Awaiting the final shuffle. Apply chair 77 spacing. Queen in the room, do not outpace the silence. Most employees don't know what these phrases mean, but upper management does. In a luxury skyscraper in Bangkok, an elite consultancy creates a program called Echo Flow. Clients pay 6 figures to learn how to walk into a room and create pause, construct narrative gravity, disappear without erasure, leave presence without noise. One participant leaves a review. I used to chase applause. Now, I wait for silence to find me. Their icon? A koi, not jumping, just hovering, mid-motion, as if deciding whether movement is even necessary. And on encrypted forums, people continue to post photos. Doorways, backs of heads, koi ponds, casino carpets, with captions like, "He might have passed here." Smelled sandalwood. Felt watched. All unconfirmed, all convincing, because confirmation would collapse the myth, and in Wan's universe doubt is design. Then, in October 2025, something odd happens. A minimalist podcast on negotiation psychology uploads a 5-minute audio episode. No intro, no outro. Just ambient casino floor sounds, a quiet fan in the background, and a single voice whispering, "There's no need to raise the stakes. The room is already folded." The ones who flinch first aren't always the weakest, just the loudest. If you listen closely enough, even fear stops talking. 77. Listeners debate whether the voice is synthesized. One comment stands out. Even if it's not him, it's him. And that's the point. Wan has become the uncertain constant, a shadow ruler of emotional climates, a sovereign of pacing. So what do you think? Is he gone? Is he real? Or is he simply the echo that made power feel heavier? Back in Macau, under the new casinos and luxury franchises, old men still play mahjong in alley cafes. One day, a stranger sits down. No fanfare, no announcement. He doesn't speak. He doesn't play. He just watches. Then, after a while, he leaves a Queen of Spades card on the table and walks away. The old men stare at it. They don't touch it, not out of fear, out of understanding. Because in this world, real power no longer needs to shout or even speak. It simply arrives, reshapes the air, and vanishes, leaving behind only rhythm. And rhythm, once known, can't be forgotten. So as the koi swims in infinite loops, and silence bends once more to the presence that mastered it, you realize Wan Kuok-koi never vanished. He withdrew into influence, and now, as the echoes of Wan's story soften in your mind, let them settle like dust on an untouched floor, gentle, weightless, familiar. The neon hum of Macau fades into mist, the clatter of casino chips a distant rattle lost to memory. No more glances over shoulders, no more unread signals, just stillness. Allow your breath to slow, matching the rhythm of that koi circling a quiet pond. Not searching, just moving, because stillness can be motion too. The man we've walked beside tonight, if walked is even the word, taught us that not every empire is made of steel or blood. Some are built from glances, gestures, timing, and in that quiet space between words, you might feel your body unwind, your mind softening its grip on what's next. You've been carrying the weight of presence, his, yours, theirs. Now you get to let it go. Let the idea of him drift backward into dream space, a nameless silhouette behind a fogged glass door. Unopened, unbothered. Let the room be still. You're safe here. Your thoughts can dim now. Your breath has earned its ease. No more questions, just the soft pull of sleep, steady, deep, undisturbed. And if silence speaks to you again tonight, maybe just smile back. One of the 7, or the 8th, that no one names.